Chapter 284. It's Prince of Zhou's horse. Xiao Xuanzi was shocked and didn't dare to hide it anymore. He said with sweat all over his head. Liu Zhou's horse? Yes, it's Prince of Zhou's horse. I have sent someone to check it just now. It is said that Prince of Zhou got a new horse and hasn't been trained well. He took it out for a ride today. Unexpectedly, when the horse saw so many people on Vermilion Bird Avenue, it panicked and ran. It accidentally hit second Miss Qin's carriage and almost killed me. When Xiao Xuanzi said this, he looked at Chu Luqian, who was lying on the bed with a pale face. His voice trembled and he couldn't go on. Well, they just can't bear to see me treat Qin well. They all want to help me. Come on, summon Prince of Zhou. Empress Dowager shouted angrily. A nanny retreated respectfully and went outside to send someone to summon Prince of Zhou, Zhou. Prince Zhou came very quickly and soon arrived at the Imperial Institute of Medicine. The Empress also came with him. At this time, Qin Wanru had been woken up and stood behind the Empress Dowager, looking down and waiting. Imperial Grandmother, I didn't know it. I have entered the palace to see my mother. Chu Liuzhou looked blank and looked at the Empress Dowager who came in with him. Empress Dowager, Zhou, entered the palace a long time ago. This time you held this banquet, Zhou, entered the palace a long time ago. He asked if you needed his help. The Empress said with a flattering smile. Only her pale lips showed that she was nervous. He has entered the palace early, so he has nothing to do with it. The horse belonged to his mansion, right? Why did it knock Prince Qin unconscious? Qin, was in such a condition. Would he still be eye-catching? Well, I'll go and tell the Emperor right now. Just find a few loyal people and send me and Prince Qin to a safe place. Even if it's a wild forest in the mountains, it's safer than staying in the palace. The Empress Dowager shouted angrily and sternly. Her words were extremely merciless, directly pointing out that the Empress and Prince of Zhou intended to kill Chu Luqian. The Empress couldn't stand it anymore. She knelt down and said, Mother, this matter really has nothing to do with Zhou, I will ask Zhou, to investigate it later. He will definitely find out the truth. Since the Empress knelt down, Chu Luqian naturally knelt down as well. A trace of malice flashed across his eyes. When he turned his eyes to Chu Luqian on the bed, his eyes were filled with malice and hostility. How could this patient not die? He had been sick for so many years, yet he still had a breath left. Although Chu Liuzhou really wanted Chu Luqian to die early, at this moment, he still hoped that Chu Luqian would stay alive. He clearly knew that if something really happened to Chu Luqian at this time, he would definitely be in trouble. Was Chu Luiyue against him? Or someone else? Although he knelt there with his head lowered, Chu Liuzhou's brain kept spinning and he secretly gnashed his teeth. If he knew who did this to him from behind, he would definitely not spare him. Killing two birds with one stone referred to the current situation. If Chu Luqian died, he would definitely lose favor with Imperial Grandmother and Imperial Father. Even if he was the legitimate son, he was afraid that he would have nothing to do with the throne. Thinking of this, Chu Liuzhou couldn't wait to kill all the people in the mansion who were related to this matter. Chu Liuzhou clenched his fists under his sleeves. Imperial Grandmother, I will go back to investigate it now. I will definitely find out the truth. Chu Liuzhou gnashed his teeth and said. Qin, is already like this. Even if you find out the truth, so what? I don't know what will happen to him in such a condition. The Empress Dowager said in a choked voice. Looking at Chu Luqian, who still didn't wake up on the bed, she felt very distressed. She reached out to hold his cold hand on his chest and couldn't even speak for a moment. The Empress also looked at Chu Luqian in panic. She knew the consequences of this matter as well as Chu Liuzhou, so after getting the news, she hurried to the Imperial Institute of Medicine. At this time, she also felt dizzy and her hands and feet were cold. Although she had hoped that Chu Luqian would die in the past, she also didn't want anything to happen to him at this time. Mother, Mother, Prince Chen moved. Suddenly the Empress became excited and reached out to point at Chu Liuchen's hand and shouted. Qin Wanru slightly tilted her head and her eyes fell on Chu Liuchen's hand. His slender hand moved slightly again. This time, more people saw it. The Empress Dowager immediately stood up, squatted in front of the bed, and held Chu Liuchen's hand tightly. Chen, are you awake? Are you okay? Her voice was trembling and frightened. It was obvious that the Empress Dowager was really nervous. Chu Liuzhou took 2 steps on his knees and also came to the bed. He nervously looked at Chu Liuchen's face on the bed with deep concern in his eyes. If she didn't know that this person probably wanted Chu Liuchen to die early, even Qin Wanru would think that they had a deep brotherhood. Imperial physician, summon the imperial physician. The Empress shouted. Immediately, an imperial physician who was waiting in the corridor came in. The palace maids helped the Empress Dowager and Prince Zhou to stand up and make way for the imperial physician. The Empress Dowager was helped to sit down again. Everyone nervously watched the imperial physician feel Chu Liuchen's pulse. It was so quiet in the room that everyone's heartbeat could almost be heard. Although Qin Wanru had some confidence in her heart, she still involuntarily clenched her fists. Just now when she felt his pulse, Chu Liuchen's pulse was very slow and even had a feeling of stagnation. If she only felt his pulse, she would indeed feel that he was seriously injured, but Qin Wanru also felt his pulse before. His pulse was no different from before. He was originally sick, and his illness was not light. The illness brought by congenital illness was not so easy to be eliminated. His pulse was more suffocating and superficial than ordinary people's. Anyone who felt his pulse would know that he was sick and weak, but it was the same as before. His pulse did not increase because of the collision this time. At that time, she was very surprised. But what made her feel more at ease was that when she felt Chu Liuchen's pulse for Chu Liuchen, his hand also moved at that time, and he absolutely consciously pinched her wrist, and then he put the other hand down. Based on what was said above, Qin Wanru felt that Chu Liuchen was pretending to be sick. As for how long he would pretend, it depended on his own intention. Now did he intend to wake up? She inexplicably felt relieved in her heart. Report to the Empress Dowager and the Empress, Prince Qin should be fine, but he still needs to take good care of himself. The imperial physician also breathed a sigh of relief, wiped the sweat on his forehead and said. Prince Qin was like a time bomb to the entire Imperial Institute of Medicine. No one knew when he would really be sick and could not wake up. At that time, no matter who took the turn, he might be beheaded. So that going to Prince Chen's mansion to treat Prince Chen was like a matter of death. Everyone felt standing on the edge of a cliff, for fear that something would happen to Prince Chen accidentally. At this time, sensing that Chu Liuchen should be fine this time, the imperial physician also breathed a sigh of relief. Chen. The Empress Dowager almost cried with joy. After saying, Buddha is merciful, to the sky for a few times, she whispered in Chu Liuchen's ear. The Empress and Chu Liuzhou also looked at him nervously. Finally, in their expectant eyes, Chu Liuchen's hand moved again, and then he slowly opened his eyes and whispered, Grandma, I'm fine. His words made the Empress Dowager's eyes turn red. She said repeatedly, Yes, Chen is fine. How could Chen be fine? It's all my fault. If I didn't hold the banquet this time, I wouldn't have caused such a big trouble. I just want to give you the position of princess. Can't you be tolerated? The Empress and Chu Liuzhou did not dare to answer. They stood with pale faces and bowed their heads, with cold sweat on their backs. These words were very rebellious. Whoever answered would be unlucky. Even the Empress did not dare to answer, and could only pretend that she did not hear it. Grandma, I'm really fine, but my head. Chu Liuchen's long eyelashes fluttered. He reached out his hand and touched his forehead gently, frowning uncomfortably. The handsome young man's face was pale and sick, but the frown made him look a little more sad. Even so, he still looked harmless and simple. The Empress Dowager only felt that her nose was sour. Why was such a good grandson not tolerated by others? She stared at the Empress fiercely and waved her hand to drive them away. Chen has woken up. Empress, go to host today's banquet. As for Prince Shou, Imperial Grandmother, I'll investigate this matter right away. I'll give my third brother an explanation. Chu Liuzhou said with hatred and a cold face. He really wanted to tear apart all the people in his mansion who looked after the horses. They couldn't even keep a horse under control and let it rush out and hurt people. If it hurt other people, it would be fine. But Chu Luchen, the invalid, seemed to have a short life. How could he let his horse hit him? Chu Liuzhou thought that Chu Liuzhou deliberately wanted to hurt him. He really didn't want to stay here. Then you can leave. The Empress Dowager said coldly. The Empress Dowager and Chu Luchen said goodbye to the Empress Dowager and comforted Chu Luchen who had just woken up. Then they left. When they arrived at the gate of the Imperial Institute of Medicine, they both stopped. Several trusted subordinates were scattered around. Zhou, who meddled in your mansion? Of course, the Empress believed that her son was not so stupid. Even if the invalid was favored, how long could he live? The Imperial Institute of Medicine had repeatedly said that he would not live long. Why would they hurt him and arouse the disgust of the Emperor and the Empress Dowager? The biggest possibility was that someone secretly used Prince Zhou's people to hurt Chu Luchen. Then, no matter what the result was, it would be good for the person secretly. I don't know. Mother, don't worry. I'll investigate it now. I'll find out the truth. Chu Liuzhou said fiercely. Find it out as soon as possible. No matter what, you must hand him over to your imperial grandmother. The Empress was also full of hatred. She gnashed her teeth and said. She was the Empress of a country, but just now she had to beg for mercy from the Empress Dowager. Thinking of this, the blue veins on her forehead bulged. It would not be so easy to end this matter. Yes, Mother. I'll investigate it right away. Chu Liuzhou said. The Empress nodded. Chu Liuzhou strode away angrily. All of them thought that this was a conspiracy against the royal family. All of them thought that Qin Yuru, who was involved in it, was just an innocent bystander. No one really cared about her. Chapter 285. The room was very quiet, and the tranquilizing incense rose from the window with a faint fragrance. Chu Luchen on the bed closed his eyes, but it could be seen that he didn't fall asleep. His handsome and delicate face was pale like snow, and he frowned from time to time, but obviously he didn't have the strength to say anything. Empress Dowager tucked him in the quilt, sighed, and turned to Qin Wanru, and then looked her up and down. Feeling Empress Dowager's gaze, Qin Wanru lowered her head tightly, and looked a little nervous. Her long eyelashes trembled a few times uneasily. But no girl was not nervous when she saw Empress Dowager for the first time. Are you the second daughter of Ningyuan Army General's mansion? Empress Dowager's voice was not high, but it was very majestic. Empress Dowager, I am. Qin Wanru said softly. Did you know Chen when you were in Jiangzhou? When Empress Dowager spoke, she didn't look at Qin Wanru, but looked at her grandson aside. As expected, she saw his eyelids slightly twitch twice, and she couldn't help but flash a smile on her face. His Highness lived in my mansion at that time, and then he was treated in Jingxin Monastery. Qin Wanru replied respectfully, and a pair of bright watery eyes stared at the square in front of her, looking both obedient and well-behaved. Did you learn medicine from the master of Jingxin Monastery? Her words aroused Empress Dowager's interest, and her obedient look made her have a good impression on her, so she immediately asked with a smile. Yes, I learned some medical skills from Mingqiu Nun of Jingxin Monastery. Qin Wanru answered, and the restraint just now gradually disappeared. Her expression looked much more natural, and her behavior was also very well behaved. Empress Dowager was very satisfied that Qin Wanru could quickly relax, and her etiquette was not bad at all. Then help me to have a look. Empress Dowager reached out her hand, and a nanny had already rolled up her sleeves. Qin Wanru raised a pair of watery eyes, and looked at Empress Dowager in astonishment, but then she gracefully bowed to Empress Dowager, walked over, and reached out to feel Empress Dowager's pulse. The room suddenly became quiet. Empress Dowager turned around and saw Chu Liuchen's slightly raised eyelashes. It was obvious that he had peeped at her just now. She felt more confident. Qin Wanru put down Empress Dowager's hand and said softly, "Empress Dowager, do you have the symptoms of qi deficiency and phlegm? If it is serious, you will cough up blood. Then how should I treat it?" Empress Dowager asked with a smile. Qin Wanru thought for a while and said, "Empress Dowager should have her own medicine to treat this disease. I just want to remind Empress Dowager that you should pay more attention to your diet. You should pay more attention to your daily life and take care of yourself slowly. Especially in this cold weather, Empress Dowager should take care of her body." Her words were very subtle and didn't suppress the other imperial doctors, showing that her medical skills were very good. She didn't even say much about the Empress Dowager's symptoms, but in fact, she had already said the cause of the Empress Dowager's illness. Moreover, it didn't hurt the other imperial doctors at all. It could be said that she covered all aspects. Empress Dowager nodded repeatedly and was quite satisfied with Qin Wanru. If Qin Wanru boasted at this time and said how to treat her illness, she would not believe it. She had her own imperial doctors whom she could trust. Moreover, Qin Wanru was too young. In the eyes of the Empress Dowager, she was just a child. Even if such a young child had learned medical skills, how much could she know? It would be good if she could give a reason. If she had to show off, it would only make the Empress Dowager unhappy. Her words were very consistent with her current age, and her words were so watertight, which made the Empress Dowager feel that she was very smart and lovely. Moreover, she was so delicate and beautiful, which made people feel like she was liked. Then you just felt Chen Er's pulse. What do you think of Chen Er's illness? Empress Dowager's voice became more and more gentle, looking at her and asking. This was very difficult to answer, even more difficult than the pulse feeling by the Empress Dowager before. Everyone in the world knew that Chu Liuchen could not live for a long time, but she knew that he actually lived for a long time. In the last life, his health was getting better and better. Otherwise, he would not become the crown prince of a country, hold the power of a country, and become the future emperor. But now, he looked like he was dying, and this should also be recognized by the doctors in the palace. When Chu Liuchen met her last time, he once said that the palace found another miracle-working doctor to treat him, which also showed that the officials in the palace were helpless and could only find another brilliant doctor. How could Chu Liuchen's health be good in this case? Report to the Empress Dowager, my medical skills are shallow, and I dare not to criticize the illness of His Highness. I only know that if His Highness can take a good rest, not get angry, and keep a good mood, he will definitely be better. Qin Wanru knelt down and said respectfully with her head lowered. Her words were even more vague than the Empress Dowager's illness just now. It seemed that she just said it casually, but the way she suddenly knelt down and said it after thinking for a long time made people understand that what she said was not an excuse, but what she really thought. As for Chu Liuchen's illness, she did not dare to say it. Or it could be said that there was no way to say it. The Empress Dowager showed disappointment on her face and smiled bitterly. In fact, she also knew how her grandson's health was, but she just had a vain hope. At this time, although she was also very disappointed, it was not the biggest blow because she was mentally prepared. How could she not know how Chu Liuchen's health was? Her grandson was good at everything except for his poor health. How could the congenital fetal poison be easily diagnosed and treated? Thinking of this, the Empress Dowager's eyes turned red. She picked up a handkerchief and gently wiped the corners of her eyes. She really felt sorry for her grandson, more so than the others. He was such a good child. If it were not at that time, maybe he would not be in such a situation now. What she could do now was to spoil him as much as possible. Even if she spoiled him into the most playboy in the imperial court, the Empress Dowager did not care. As long as he was happy, as long as he could be happy, nothing else mattered. It was her son's sin, and her grandson was the most innocent one. Get up. The Empress Dowager whispered. Yes. Qin Wanru stood up with Yujie's hand. Go and change your clothes. You can go now. Looking at the ashes and torn clothes on Qin Wanru, the Empress Dowager said, the banquet has to be held later. Yes, Empress Dowager. Qin Wanru nodded and was about to leave. Suddenly, she heard someone shouting outside, the Emperor arrives. One after another, it was getting closer and closer. Hearing the hurried footsteps, the servants in the room all knelt down, and Qin Wanru also knelt down again with a plop sound. It was the Emperor who came over. The door was pushed open heavily. Hearing the people in the room shouting, "Long live the Emperor," 3 times, Qin Wanru also kowtowed and prostrated. A golden robe corner flashed in front of her eyes, and the flashing golden silk thread quickly slipped in front of her eyes. Then she heard a man's majestic voice, "Mother, how is Chen-er?" "What do you mean?" "He almost lost his life. They can't tolerate Chen-er. He is in such a state, and they still don't let him." The Empress Dowager's voice was a little choked. The Emperor hurriedly took a few steps forward and sat on the bed. Looking at the pale face of his nephew, he looked gloomy. Several eunuchs who followed him in all lowered their heads and did not dare to move. Prince Zhou's horse. When the Emperor came over, he had already known some things, so he asked directly at this time. "It is said to be Prince Zhou's horse, but I don't know who it is. Chen has become a tool for them to fight for power and profit." The Empress Dowager said angrily. Born in the royal family, of course, she could see things more deeply. She would not conclude that it was done by Prince Zhou because of what she saw on the surface, but it could not be said that it had absolutely nothing to do with Prince Zhou. But even Chu Luqian was killed. Naturally, they wanted to use Chu Luqian's value to make profits for some people. As long as she thought of this, the Empress Dowager felt very distressed. The grandson she had painstakingly grown up in her hands could not become a tool for those people to fight for power and profit. "Check, I will definitely check it out when I go back." The Emperor glanced at Chu Luqian's face and said coldly. "Yes, we have to check it out. We can't let it go casually. This kind of thing can happen again. Chen can escape this time, but it is not certain next time. What's more, Chen is originally sick and weak. These people are really cruel. They still want to kill Chen, or when he is in such a state." The Empress Dowager's face was also gloomy. "Mother, don't worry. I will never be greedy. No matter who is involved in this matter, I will give Chen an explanation." The Emperor promised the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager wiped the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief and nodded, "You go back first. I am here. Chen is fine now. I will stand guard here." "Yes, mother." The Emperor agreed, but he did not leave. Instead, he looked at the Empress Dowager with some hesitation, as if he wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. The Empress Dowager's face darkened. "Don't tell me that she wants to see Chen. Mother, she is always very worried." The Emperor begged in a low voice with an embarrassed look. "What do you mean by very worried?" "I don't want to hear it, neither does Chen. Tell her not to disturb Chen-er's life if she has nothing to do. Otherwise, I will never spare her." The Empress Dowager shouted sternly, "Don't help her anymore. I don't want to hear about her." After saying that, she turned her head decisively and showed the back of her head to the Emperor. Seeing how the Empress Dowager acted, the Emperor knew that it was useless for him to say anything. He could only sigh, stood up, looked at Chu Luqian again, and then turned to leave. But when he passed by Qin Wanru, he stopped and said, "Is this the second daughter of Ningyuan army general?" Chen bumped into her when he was saving her. "Your Majesty." Qin Wanru kneeled on the ground and said respectfully, "Raise your head." The emperor looked at Qin Wanru and said. Qin Wanru slowly raised her head and lowered her eyes. Her eyes did not move randomly, but only fell on her nose. She was well behaved and steady. She saw a bright yellow robe at the corner of her eyes, and she felt a strong power on her face. The emperor was looking at her, and she pressed the corner of her skirt hard. Chapter 286. It is indeed a little small. Empress Dowager nodded, and her eyes also fell on Qin Wanru's delicate and dignified little face. Then she turned back to look at Chu Luchen, who was lying on the bed. Up to now, he was still lying motionless, and she couldn't help sighing in her heart. "You go back first, it's not urgent." "Yes, mother, then I go back first," the emperor said, and then he turned around and walked out of the room with his people. "You also leave," Empress Dowager said. Qin Wanru knew that this time it was for her, so she answered in a low voice, and then left respectfully with Yujie. When they reached the door, she gently breathed a sigh of relief. "Second Miss Qin, please come with me." A palace maid came over with a smile and bowed to her. Qin Wanru nodded, followed the palace maid to the side, and entered a wing room, where the clothes she had prepared before were placed on the table. "Second Miss Qin, please change your clothes here, and call me if you need anything," the palace maid said. "This clothes? Where did you get them?" Qin Wanru asked. "They were taken from the carriage of Second Miss Qin's mansion," the palace maid said. So at that time, their carriage was also taken into the palace, and the carriage had been checked. Yujie nodded to let the palace maid leave, closed the door, and then wiped the cold sweat on her head. "Miss, who is so vicious to kill you?" Except for Qin Wanru, only Yujie knew this matter. It was not Chu Luchen who wanted to deal with this matter, but Qin Wanru. In other words, without Chu Luchen, even if Qin Wanru did not die at that time, she was afraid that several bones would be broken at this time. Everything had been planned out, including the traffic jam in front, the old beggar, and the running horse that rushed out at the right time and angle. There was only one purpose: to deal with her. A trace of cold darkness flashed in Qin Wanru's eyes, and an unconcealable hostility rose from the bottom of her heart. She clearly knew that if Chu Luchen did not help her, she would definitely end up with blood splashing on the spot today. In order to kill her, it could be said that they took great pains to do this outside the palace, and even involved Prince Shou. "Duke Xing's mansion," Qin Wanru said affirmatively. Her cold smile and the dim light in her black eyes made Qin Wanru look a little more evil spirit that could not be seen clearly in the past. "Miss, why did Madam of Duke Xing do this?" "Just because she wanted to adopt Miss as her daughter, and Miss was unwilling. She wanted to destroy Miss." "Miss, did you make a mistake? It should be Duke Yong's mansion, right?" Yujie was shocked and said with her eyes wide open in disbelief. "Duke Xing's mansion? Duke Yong's mansion?" His lips curled into an enchanting smile with a hint of bloodlust. Both manners were involved in this matter, no one could escape. Yujie might not understand the reason, but now Qin Wanru was more and more convinced of her conjecture. If it was not true, Madam of Duke Xing would not stare at her like a mad dog. In the last life, Madam of Duke Xing colluded with Madame D to step into the dirty, and it was the same in this life. However, in the last life, she was hurt by Madame D early and had no power to fight back. In this life, she was reborn, and was no longer the Qin Wanru who was weak and let others trample on her. Under the punishment at the waist, blood and tears cried out. It turned out that it was not only his own hatred, but also the hatred of his other relatives. 2 drops of tears slowly rolled down from the corners of his eyes, sparkling with hostility. It turned out that there was not only a secret about her origin, but also a blood feud. "Miss, what's wrong with you?" Yujie had never seen Qin Wanru so weak and asked in surprise. "Change your clothes first, and I will tell you when we go back." Since she had figured it out, there was no need to think about it for the time being. Qin Wanru waved her hand and said. She walked to the table and picked up the clothes that Nanny Dong prepared for her. This set of clothes was different from the butterfly dress she was wearing. The bottom of the 8-piece skirt was lotus leaves, and pink and delicate lotus flowers poked out of the lotus leaves. When she walked, lotus flowers bloomed. The color of the skirt was gradually green, and it was covered with a layer of light gauze, which made the gradual change more fairy. The gauze of the skirt was slightly raised, and the skirt was hanging down. The lotus leaves were in full bloom, and the beautiful and slender waist was easy to hold. The light pink coat on it was also very suitable for Qin Wanru's age. The light pink coat was a little more white than the main color, which made the whole dress not only fairy but also simple and elegant. This time, it didn't take long for her to change clothes and freshen up. She stood in front of the door again. Yujie pushed the door open and saw the palace maid waiting outside. "Second Miss Qin, the Empress Dowager ordered me to take you to the banquet. You don't need to say goodbye. Prince Qin is not in good health and needs to rest quietly." A trace of amazement flashed in the palace maid's eyes, but then she lowered her head and said. She had seen all kinds of beauties in the palace, but the second Miss Qin in front of her made the palace maid feel that the 3,000 beauties she had seen were nothing more than this. But she was a little small. "Qin, what do you think of the girl in Ningyuan Army General's mansion?" The Empress Dowager smiled and said to Chu Luchen, who opened his eyes on the bed. "Grandma." Chu Luchen blinked his eyes and said with a little bitterness, "Not bad, at least I don't dislike her when I see her." His words reminded the Empress Dowager of the last banquet. At that banquet, the young madams were all shy when they saw the other princes. Thinking of this, the Empress Dowager felt depressed. What she wanted most was to choose a granddaughter-in-law for her beloved grandson, so that she could take care of Chen. How could she be happy when all the young madams were not Chu Luchen? At that banquet, the Empress Dowager not only didn't let the young madam choose the one she liked, but also made her grandson feel wronged. The Empress Dowager also disliked those young madams from aristocratic families. She thought that they were a group of blind people who couldn't see the advantages of her grandson. Hearing Chu Liuchen's words, the Empress Dowager sighed softly and said, "But, she is so young. What can she take care of you?" "Imperial grandmother, I didn't ask her to take care of me. I just feel that we can talk." Chu Luchen smiled slightly. A touch of vitality appeared on his pale face, and his face became a little gentle. He stretched out his hand and wanted to sit up. The Empress Dowager hurriedly took a cushion for him and put it behind him. Chu Luchen coughed twice in a low voice. A nanny poured a glass of water for Chu Luchen. He took it and drank a few mouthfuls. The rising steam made his pale face a little more lustrous, and he looked a little livelier. "You asked me to go to Shingguang Temple before. Was it also for her?" Seeing him put down the teacup, the Empress Dowager whispered. "Imperial grandmother, the master of Jingxin Monastery and Mingxiu Nun took good care of me when they were in Jiangzhou. Second Miss Qin also pounded medicine for me, so we can be considered as acquaintances. Since she came to the capital city, I have to go to see her. Since I was a child, no one has ever gotten along with me." Chu Luchen lowered his head, and his long eyelashes cast irregular shadows on his pale face. There was a kind of decadence coming from his bones. The Empress Dowager's heart was fiercely pained. Her eyes turned red. She turned sideways and reached out to wipe the tear stains on the corners of her eyes. "Well, since you think it's good, then it's her." Her grandson's request was so simple. He didn't want a woman who could accompany him. He just wanted a playmate who could talk to him. The Empress Dowager felt that there was no need to make him unhappy. This child had suffered a lot because of this body since he was a child. If he could make him happy, he would be happy. But now this child wanted to find a playmate. If he felt that she was not suitable after getting along with her for a period of time, it would be troublesome if he really liked other women as his wife in the future. Moreover, Qin Wanru's status was still a little too low. Other princes could marry her, the daughter of a third-level mansion. After all, the emperor and the empress dowager didn't want the other princes to marry wives who had too much help from the maternal family. But Chu Luchun was different. The empress dowager and the emperor had the same idea. He had to find a woman whose maternal family was powerful, so that she could protect him after the death of the emperor and keep him safe all his life. Although the imperial physicians all said that Chu Luchun's illness was a fetal poison and it was uncertain when he would die, in the heart of the empress dowager, she felt that Chu Luchun would live a long life. Of course, she should think more about his future. If she died in the future, she had to make sure that Chu Luchun would not be bullied. So the power of the maternal family was very important. Chen, the daughter of the Qin family is really young, isn't she? The empress dowager thought for a while and said gently. She is about 11 or 12 years old. Chu Luchun thought for a while and said gently. How about making an engagement for you? First, she will be a concubine, and then when she is better, she will be the princess. The empress dowager tentatively said. The so-called better could not be confirmed by one or two words. In the heart of the empress dowager, she was still not satisfied with Qin Wanru. Imperial grandmother, what do you mean by better? The concubine that was originally arranged can also become the princess. Chu Luchun raised his eyes, looked at the empress dowager with a pair of handsome eyes and said. Although he expressed his dissatisfaction, his expression and behavior were still elegant and gentle. He was not as good as an elegant child, and he was so well educated. The empress dowager was sad again. After a long while, she calmed down and whispered her concerns. She knew that her grandson was smart. How could he not understand her words of delay? Her status is a little low. Chen has to marry a noble daughter of lineal descent. It's better to be the eldest daughter of lineal descent. The most distinguished eldest lineal daughter among the misses of aristocratic families was often cultivated with great efforts. Such a woman was the favorite candidate of the empress dowager. Imperial grandmother, so what if she is the eldest lineal daughter? If she is not good, she will still not be good. His long eyelashes drooped down again. His eyes were a little deeper, and his voice was gloomy. The empress dowager couldn't say anything for a while. She knew what Chu Luchun meant. She was heavily hit in the heart. So what if she was the eldest lineal daughter? Wasn't that woman the noble eldest lineal daughter? But how could the things she did be associated with the noble and decent eldest lineal daughter? The empress dowager thought angrily that the so-called education was even worse than that of the daughter of a concubine from a small family. Imperial grandmother, this matter is not urgent. Anyway, she is just a good playmate. Chen, actually doesn't want to delay others. Second Miss Qin is also young, and it is enough for her to talk with Chen, I only hope that imperial grandmother and uncle will not stop her. Chu Luchun raised his head again, with a gentle smile on his face. His attitude was amiable and gentle. Even though he was lingering in bed, the sick and weak teenager in the ink landscape was still incomparably handsome. Chapter 287. The palace maid took Qin Wanru to the palace banquet. The palace banquet was set in a garden. From the entrance, one could see pots of Tang Qianyan in full bloom. It was not the time for Tang Qianyan to bloom at this time, but there were still so many Tang Qianyan in different shapes and enchanting figures in this garden. After entering the garden, one could see that many tents were encircled in a semicircle, facing a large flower bed in the middle. The flower bed was surrounded by potted flowers, and in the middle, there was a large empty platform. The platform covered the roof, and the veil around it fluttered in the wind. Behind it was a large rockery, leaving only the front half of the circle. The back of the tent was also encircled, and the small stove inside was warm. Although the front of the tent was open to face the flower bed in the middle, Qin Wanru didn't feel cold. The sunlight fell on the flower bed above. With the rockery behind it to block the wind and the sunlight facing the flower bed, the stage in the middle of the flower bed was actually not cold. This arrangement was very chic. Second Miss Qin. A delicate voice suddenly sounded. Qin Wanru stopped and looked over. When she saw a delicate woman, a trace of sarcasm flashed across her eyes. She still couldn't forget this voice. The harsh, sharp, and merciless contempt seemed to be right in front of her, but now she looked like she wanted to say something, which was completely different from the person in her memory. Wang Xingshue's younger sister, Wang Yishu, was said to be a woman who was well-read. In the last life, Qin Wanru was schemed to marry Wang Xingxue. This well-read female scholar had been very nice to Qin Wanru at the beginning, but later, when the affair between Ning Xueqing and Wang Xingxue was exposed, she ridiculed Qin Wanru with all kinds of sharp words. Her mean and sarcastic face made it seem as if Qin Wanru was the enemy who killed her father. He didn't expect to see this sharp and unkind talented lady again at this time. This was the female companion that Madame of Duke Xing found for her. What a coincidence. Excuse me, you are? Qin Wanru looked Wang Yishu up and down with a blank look. My aunt is Madame of Duke Xing, and my surname is Wang. Didn't she tell second Miss Qin? Wang Yishu said with a bit timid look. Her eyes looked bright and kind. Additionally, she suppressed her timid kindness, which could leave a good impression on people. Are you the miss mentioned by Madame of Duke Xing? Qin Wanru withdrew her gaze and said indifferently, do you want to follow me? This. Isn't that what Aunt said? Wang Yishu looked a little embarrassed. It seemed that she bit her lip and blushed because of Qin Wanru's harsh words. Madame of Duke Xing only asked me to take you into the palace. Then. I'm afraid I can't help you. I'm not familiar with the palace. Qin Wanru looked embarrassed and looked at Wang Yishu, who was half a head taller than her. The palace maid who sent Qin Wanru to the place was originally going to leave, but now she also saw something strange, so she stood still and simply didn't leave. Although she was a palace maid by the Empress Dowager's side, she was dressed like the other palace maids, so no one realized that she was actually not a palace maid here. In order to be inconspicuous, she even squatted down, picked up a rag beside her, and wiped the flower pot. But Qin Wanru saw it. Second Miss Qin, didn't my aunt ask you to introduce me to Rui and great elder princess? Wang Yishu said with a flustered look and was secretly anxious. This matter was completely different from what her aunt said. Didn't she say that everything had been done? This. I'm afraid I can't do that. I'm not very familiar with Rui and great elder princess. Qin Wanru looked at Wang Yishu with embarrassment. She looked extremely dazed, blinked her watery eyes, and seemed to be at a loss for what to do. The adopted daughter of Madame of Duke Xing is first Miss Qi. Why does she keep dragging our miss? Yujia muttered unhappily. Second Miss Qin, my aunt entrusted me to you, right? Wang Yishu was unhappy. She glared at Yujia, the servant girl who didn't follow the rules, and said with a little anger. In her heart, she didn't like Qin Wanru, so she pretended to be delicate and timid. Now this second Miss Qin was even inferior to her, so she couldn't hold back her temper. Although Wang Yishu's appearance was not the most outstanding, she thought that she was talented and learned. Seeing Qin Wanru's useless look, she couldn't hide the arrogance on her face anymore. Miss Wang, you are an adult, and you entrust me to take care of you. Qin Wanru slightly opened her cherry lips, raised her head, looked at Wang Yishu, and said. Miss Wang, you seem to be a few years older than my miss, right? You are so old, but haven't you been to the imperial palace? Yujia said, not very sensible, and looked surprised. Her voice was not high, but it was enough to be heard by the people around. They also stood at an intersection, and there were many people coming and going. Most of them paid more attention to Qin Wanru because of her amazing dress. Hearing that they had a dispute, they listened to them. When they heard the servant girl's words, several sarcastic eyes fell on Wang Yishu. No matter from which aspect, Wang Yishu looked older than Qin Wanru. Now the older one asked the younger one to take care of her, which was really a joke. The status of Prince Yu's mansion used to be high, but it had declined later. After that, it almost attached itself to Duke Xing's mansion. Because it attached itself to Duke Xing's mansion, although it was declining, it would occasionally associate with some unmarried misses. For the sake of Duke Xing's mansion, people also thought highly of it. Therefore, it was said that she was a talented lady in the capital city. In the past, there were many misses who knew Wang Yishu, but Wang Yishu's status was not high after all, so she did not have the opportunity to attend the palace banquet. This time, no one knew what method Madame of Duke Xing used to get her to attend the palace banquet. Sensing all kinds of sarcastic eyes around her, Wang Yishu's face turned red. The servant girl beside her took a step forward and scolded Yujia angrily, "Misses are talking. How can you, as a servant girl, be so unruly?" "But what I said is the truth." Yujia looked at a loss, as if she had not realized what was going on, and directly responded with such a sentence. This situation of confusion was very similar to Qin Wanru's. The master and the servant were confronting Wang Yishu and her servant girl, and it seemed that Wang Yishu and her servant girl were bullying them. Wang Yishu must have experienced a lot of things, so she immediately realized it. She hurriedly reached out to stop her servant girl, bit her lip, and eased her face. "Second Miss Qin. I'm sorry to bother you. It's the first time for me to come to the palace, and my aunt asked me to go with you. I don't know whether I am bothering you or not." Wang Yishu said very softly, without the aggressiveness just now. "This." Qin Wanru hesitated, and then pulled her skirt and said with a wry smile, "I was injured when I entered the palace just now. I may stay for a while and then leave, and I don't have the strength to meet others now. Miss Wang, please help yourself." "Second Miss Qin was injured. Let me have a look. I also know a little about medical skills when I was at home." Wang Yishu looked very concerned and reached out to take Qin Wanru's hand. Qin Wanru stepped back, avoided her hand, and shook her head, "Miss Wang, don't bother." After saying that, she bowed sideways and entered the tent next to her, as if she did not want to be close to Wang Yishu. Someone around laughed. Although the laughter was not loud, it was loud enough for Wang Yishu to hear it. Immediately, Wang Yishu's face turned red, and she clenched the handkerchief in her hand tightly, almost losing control. She secretly gritted her teeth, but followed Qin Wanru into the tent. Some young madams who were watching the fun happened to not find a place to stay, so they also followed them into the tent. When the crowd here dispersed, the palace maid who was wiping the flower pots stood up and looked thoughtfully in the direction where Qin Wanru left. She was a trusted subordinate sent by the Empress Dowager, so she naturally knew that her master treated Qin Wanru differently. So she paid more attention to Qin Wanru, but she did not expect that she would hear some words just now. How could Madame of Duke Xing get involved with Ningyuan Army General's mansion, which had just arrived in Jiangzhou, and it seemed that she had a good relationship with second Miss Qin. Duke Xing and Prince Chen had nothing to do with each other, so why did Madame of Duke Xing get involved with Qin's mansion? Was it because she knew that Prince Chen had gone to Jiangzhou and lived in Lord Qin's mansion, who was still Ningyuan Army General in Jiangzhou at that time? The palace maid felt that the more she thought about it, the more dangerous it was. It was definitely not something that a little palace maid like her could bear. She casually threw away the rag in her hand and hurriedly went to report it to the Empress Dowager. The palace was the most sensitive when facing this kind of thing, and the Empress Dowager now paid the most attention to Prince Chen now. Prince Chen had an accident not long ago, and second Miss Qin was present at the time of the accident. What kind of role did Madame of Duke Xing, who seemed to have nothing to do with it, play in it? The palace maid did not dare to think about it, and only felt that it was better to report it to the Empress Dowager. She was just a palace maid, and no one noticed that she was sent by the Empress Dowager, so naturally they would not notice her leaving. Qin Wanru entered the tent and found that it was quite large inside. The large table could at least sit a dozen young madams. At this time, there were only a few people, and most of them were empty. It was on the side, and many young madams were not willing to choose this kind of position. When several tents in the middle of the tent were full, some young madams would come to the side. When Qin Wanru came in, there were only 5 or 6 young madams inside. When they saw Qin Wanru coming in, they were all amazed, and then their eyes fell on Qin Wanru's clothes. The wind blew and raised the gauze skirt, making people feel that she was a fairy in the wind. Several young madams' eyes lit up, and after looking at each other, they all showed joy on their faces. Chapter 288. Wang Yishu said and mysteriously took out a handkerchief, which seemed to be wrapped in something. Qin Wanru had an intuition that the cloth was a little familiar. Her watery eyes narrowed slightly, and she had recognized it. It was the cloth of the dress given to her by Madame of Duke Xing. At that time, the dress was left in Rui, an great elder princess mansion, and Rui, an great elder princess also asked her not to wear it, saying that it violated the emperor's taboo in the palace. Was this the colorful yarn? And it was soaked in incense, which was fragrant. Qin Wanru didn't like using incense and was very sensitive to fragrance. Miss Wang, where did you get this handkerchief? Qin Wanru reached out to hold Wang Yishu's hand, looking surprised. What's wrong? Wang Yishu froze for a moment, looked down at the handkerchief in her hand, and sneered. As her aunt said, people from the countryside were petty. I still have a lot of this handkerchief. If second Miss Qin likes it, I will ask someone to send some to you next time. Miss Wang, do you have a lot of such handkerchiefs? Qin Wanru asked again. Wang Yishu nodded and smiled more affectionately. This kind of handkerchief is nothing. My aunt also has a lot of it. She got the handkerchief from Madame of Duke Xing, but she didn't have a lot of it as she said. It was specially given to her by Madame of Duke Xing this time, and Madame of Duke Xing told her that she would give her a few more handkerchiefs after it was done. Of course, Madame of Duke Xing pretended to be generous in front of everyone. Although her tone was gentle, her words were full of arrogance. The eyes of several young madams around were also attracted by the handkerchief. From different angles, it seemed to show different colors faintly, which was extremely gorgeous and beautiful. Miss Wang, let me have a look. The young madam who had sat over, who was closest to them, reached out and said with a smile at this time. Seeing this young madam reach out, Wang Yishu reacted quickly and put the thing in the handkerchief in her hand. Then the handkerchief was taken by this young madam and immediately passed to another young madam, which made everyone exclaim. The handkerchief was not only beautiful but also fragrant. When everyone's attention was on this handkerchief, Wang Yishu approached Qin Wanru, handed over the jade pendant hidden in her hand, and put it into Qin Wanru's hand with great enthusiasm. She lowered her voice and said, Second Miss Qin, my aunt asked you to bring this to first Miss Qi. This jade pendant was for Qi Rongji, so Qin Wanru had to accept it. Why didn't Madame of Duke Xing directly give it to first Miss Qi? This should have been sent when we recognized each other, but we forgot it at that time. Later, it seemed to be reluctant to send it. I thought that second Miss Qin could send it secretly, which could be regarded as a dignified gesture. Wang Yishu whispered in an increasingly low voice. It meant that Madame of Duke Xing had reluctantly accepted Qi Rongji, so she had sent her something casually and had forgotten to send an important thing. If she had sent it to Qi Rongji in a big way, it would have seemed a little deliberate and even made others laugh at her. So she had sent it to Qi Rongji through herself. It was very reasonable and explainable. If Qin Wanru hadn't seen this jade pendant, she would almost believe it. Qin Wanru didn't remember how she had been engaged to Wang Xingxue in the last life. But when she saw this jade pendant, some memories suddenly rushed into her mind. You bitch, you have had an affair with child Wang and even secretly took the jade pendant handed down from his family. You were like this when you were in Jiangzhou, and now you are still like this. You are really bitchy and shameless. Yes, you are bitchy, but we have to accept it. After all, he is the cousin young master of our mansion. Our madam wants to make her the co-wife of our cousin young master. The betrothed will be the wife, and the eloped will be the concubine. This is for the sake of first miss, otherwise she will only be a concubine. Qin Wanru, you can marry child Wang as the co-wife. Who asked you to be humble and have an affair with child Wang? Accusations from Qin Yuru, the arrogant old maid of Duke Xing's mansion, and Madame D seemed to be ringing in her ears. She held the jade pendant tightly and then slowly relaxed her hand. It turned out that she was engaged to Wang Xingxue because of this jade pendant. Moreover, she was not the principal wife, but the co-wife. This was also an important reason why her engagement was easily broken off after Ning Xueqing made a scene at the birthday party of old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion. She was not the principal wife, so how could she get respect? She had been pregnant. Although she was also humble, she was not much better than Ning Xueqing. What's more, for the children of the Wang family, it was more justifiable to marry Ning Xueqing. Moreover, they were childhood sweethearts, but she had schemed against them. This jade pendant was the evidence. Clang! The jade pendant in her hand fell to the ground and made a sound of breaking, which scared everyone present and made them look back. Miss Wang, I am really sorry. I broke the jade pendant you gave me. How much is it? I will compensate you. Hiding the ruthlessness in her heart, Qin Wanru raised her head and said in panic. It happened so suddenly that the jade pendant broke before Qin Wanru could hold it firmly in her hand. Wang Yishu was also stunned, but then she stood up and said with a blank face, "Second Miss Qin, what do you mean? Isn't this your jade pendant? Why is it mine now?" She reacted very quickly. Although it happened suddenly, she knew the meaning of Madame of Duke Xing, so how could she admit this jade pendant in public? This jade pendant was to be sent to Qin Wanru in the imperial palace today. As for what would happen next, Wang Yishu didn't know, but she knew that this jade pendant belonged to her brother. If she sent this jade pendant to Qin Wanru when no one was around, what Madame of Duke Xing asked her to do would be accomplished. Originally, this kind of thing should be done when no one was around, but Qin Wanru didn't intend to accompany her to meet Rui, and great elder princess. According to Madame of Duke Xing's idea, although Qin Wanru might not be willing, she would at least talk with Wang Yishu for a while. Wang Yishu would lead them aside and send the jade pendant out. Madame of Duke Xing also told Wang Yishu not to underestimate Qin Wanru. She said that this girl was smart. Although she had promised Qin Wanru before, she might not go back on her words. However, since she had gone back on her words of introducing Rui, and great elder princess to Qin Wanru, it would be embarrassing for her to refuse to bring the jade pendant to Qi Rongji. Unexpectedly, Qin Wanru went directly into the tent after refusing her. Wang Yishu had no choice but to follow her in and send the jade pendant out when no one was paying attention. When she was complacent, she saw the jade pendant break. Accidents happened one after another. Looking at the fragments on the ground, Wang Yishu was also in a trance for a while. Fortunately, she was not stupid. When she tried to please Madame of Duke Xing in Duke Xing's mansion, she was very good at observing people's expressions, so she immediately knew that she couldn't recognize this jade pendant. Miss Wang, what do you mean? Why do you say this jade pendant is mine? Isn't it wrapped in the handkerchief that Miss Wang just brought here? Qin Wanru's face turned cold, and her eyes became deep. Second Miss Qin. I just showed you this handkerchief. Why do you say there is a jade pendant? Ask these misses, who saw the jade pendant. Wang Yishu was anxious, reached out to point at the miss who held her handkerchief just now and said. The miss shook her head blankly. Just now Wang Yishu reacted very quickly, so she really didn't see it. When Wang Yishu gave the jade pendant to Qin Wanru, she didn't hear what Wang Yishu and Qin Wanru said at that time because it was too low. However, she heard clearly the discussion about this handkerchief between Qin Wanru and Wang Yishu. Second Miss Qin, I just saw such a jade pendant in your sleeve. I felt it was a good one, so I wanted to see why you accidentally broke the jade pendant. Now you said it was mine, but I obviously don't have such a jade pendant. Wang Yishu's eyes turned red. It's the first time for me to enter the palace. I'm afraid of doing something wrong and saying something wrong. How dare I talk nonsense? As she said, she shook her hands anxiously in a panic, which made people feel that there was something fishy about it. It was just a jade pendant. No matter whose jade pendant it was, it had no important relationship. A servant girl squatted down at the signal of her miss, picked up the jade pendant which had broken into 4 pieces and looked at it. Then she saw a word on the corner of the last piece of jade pendant. Her hand trembled for a moment, and the jade piece fell to the ground again. "What's wrong?" asked the Mississippi miss. It's a word. It seems to be a man's word." The servant girl stood up in a hurry, as if what fell on the ground was dirty, and hurriedly took 2 steps back. "A man's word?" The other misses all stood up, looked at Qin Wanru and then looked at Wang Yishu, and didn't know who to believe for a moment. Another servant girl squatted down, picked up the corner of the jade pendant, showed it to everyone, and said, "It's a word, shui." Hearing what she said, a trace of horror flashed across Wang Yishu's face. She covered her mouth with one hand and looked at Qin Wanru in astonishment. It seemed that she wanted to say something, but she immediately covered her mouth with her own hand. The look on her face was extremely horrified, as if she had found something big. Her action was so abrupt that everyone's eyes fell on her face. Seeming to find that the horror on her face was too eye-catching, Wang Yishu put down her hand in embarrassment and forced a smile on her face, but the smile seemed to be forced. "Miss Wang, do you know this jade pendant?" A miss raised her voice and asked. "No, I don't. I don't know it," Wang Yishu said anxiously, shaking her head hurriedly and looking away. At first glance, people could tell that she was very guilty and didn't tell the truth. "Miss Wang, if you don't tell the truth, this jade pendant will belong to you. Do you know what is the crime of framing the daughter of an imperial court official?" Her obvious guilty look was more and more suspicious in the eyes of these misses. Several more misses came into the tent. Seeing the scene in front of them, one of them said coldly. In a word, if Wang Yishu didn't tell the truth, she would deliberately frame Qin Wanru. The prince's mansion was not obvious, and it relied on Duke Xing's mansion. But if she really framed Qin Wanru in public, Madame of Duke Xing would be embarrassed even if she wanted to protect her. Chapter 289. Child Wang's Jade Pendant. A miss changed her face and couldn't help exclaiming. Everyone else was stunned and looked at Qin Wanru in astonishment. Their eyes were full of astonishment at first, and then full of sarcasm. Qin Wanru, who was a young girl and had such an outstanding appearance, had already aroused the jealousy of many people. At this time, of course, they unscrupulously expressed their strong disdain. "Miss Wang, are you sure this is your brother's jade pendant?" In everyone's eyes, Qin Wanru calmly wiped her palm with a handkerchief, as if she wanted to wipe the stain from her white and tender little hands. My brother is Wang Xingxue, and there is the word shui in his name." Wang Yishu stammered, but still plucked up her courage to say. "So I don't understand why Miss Wang showed your brother's jade pendant to me and then said it was mine. Do I know your brother?" Qin Wanru smiled slightly and looked calm. The jade pendant was broken by her in order to catch Wang Yishu off guard. No matter what Wang Yishu intended to do before, she definitely wouldn't break the jade pendant at this time. I don't know, but this jade pendant really belongs to my brother. Many people in my aunt's mansion know it. You can ask my aunt, Madame of Duke Xing, to identify it." Wang Yishu bit her lip and looked helpless. Since Wang Yishu could say this to ask Madame of Duke Xing to identify it, she was naturally very confident. Those who had some doubts also turned their eyes to Qin Wanru at this time. With the identity of Madame of Duke Xing, if she really said this, it must be true. Was there really something mysterious about the jade pendant that had been broken just now? Many misses were guessing in their hearts. Could it be that Wang Yishu saw Qin Wanru's jade pendant seemed to belong to her brother and specially asked to have a look? Qin Wanru, who was flustered, accidentally broke the jade pendant. Thinking in this way, it seemed to make sense. They looked at Qin Wanru with more sarcasm in their eyes. "Miss Wang and I met for the first time today, right? I don't know how I offended Miss Wang, so that Miss Wang took your brother's jade pendant to frame me." Qin Wanru didn't seem to understand the overbearing meaning in Wang Yishu's words and said with indifferent eyes. She didn't panic at all and looked more and more calm. It's also the first time today that I met second Miss Qin. I don't know that second Miss Qin and my brother know each other. Wang Yishu said with a frightened look, as if she had been frightened and hadn't recovered yet. Miss Wang, must you insist that this jade pendant is mine? Qin Wanru asked lightly. This was originally taken out by you. I think it looks like my brother's jade pendant. Wang Yishu answered very quickly. At this time, neither of them mentioned Qi Rongji, because it was just an excuse to send the jade pendant to Qin Wanru. Although it was not a perfect arrangement, Wang Yishu felt that she had the situation under control at this time. Although he had a frightened look on his face, a trace of pride flashed in his eyes. Wang, Qin, at look, but at, Wang, Qin, look, but, Qin, Wang, Yishu, Yen look, Lin, Wang, YT. It looks like. I'm afraid it is, isn't it? Qin Wanru looked at Wang Yishu with a faint smile. In the name of Qi Rongji, he had no choice but to accept it. Then, he could let others find out that he had this jade pendant in his arms, and then jump out to say that this jade pendant belonged to Wang Xingxue. He could even use the mouth of some people who knew about this matter to say it. Then, the evidence would be more sufficient. At the moment, he was the first one to launch an attack, but he hadn't made any subsequent arrangements. Only Wang Yishu was biting him. Qin Wanru had figured it all out in her watery eyes. Her watery eyes were extremely beautiful. Madame of Duke Xing was afraid that she would not die, so she made another move. He wanted to take her life with one move. If he couldn't take her life, then the next step would be to ruin her reputation. For such a thing to happen in the imperial palace, even if she had her father behind her, she would at most be a co-wife, or even a concubine. Other people would think that she had plotted this marriage. Later, when Ning Xueqing appeared, she would be regarded as a vicious and cheap woman who had broken up the couple. Then, she would break off the engagement. His life was going to be ruined from here on out. Step by step, Madame of Duke Xing destroyed everything she had, trampled on everything she had, and finally nailed her to death in the blood-stained land. How vicious she was. This is my brother's jade pendant. Wang Yishu felt guilty because of Qin Wanru's laughter, but then she came to her senses. She secretly scolded herself for being disappointing and hurriedly said loudly. I said that Miss Wang brought this jade pendant to frame me. You said that this jade pendant is in my hand. Do you have any evidence, Miss Wang? Qin Wanru glanced at Wang Yishu and said. Wang Yishu stammered for a while, but then she immediately asked loudly, Second Miss Qin said that this jade pendant is brought by me. Do you have any evidence? Although she couldn't prove that this jade pendant fell from Qin Wanru also had no evidence to prove that this jade pendant was given by her. It happened suddenly. No one knew that Qin Wanru would suddenly drop and break the jade pendant. Otherwise, Wang Yishu would find another opportunity to let someone bump into Qin Wanru. If it was seen that the jade pendant fell from Qin Wanru in public, Qin Wanru couldn't explain herself even if she had 10,000 mouths. Wang Yishu's aunt said that Qin Wanru came from a rich family. If Qin Wanru married her brother, she would definitely help their family business and her brother's official career. This was also the most important reason why Wang Yishu did this. The Wang family was weak. Although it relied on Duke Xing's mansion, it was not the Wang family after all. Many aristocratic families in the capital city knew the background of Wang's mansion, which also made it difficult for Wang Yishu to find a marriage. The man she liked didn't like her, and the man who liked her didn't like her. She couldn't reach a high position and had not found a suitable marriage until now. Her aunt helped her analyze that if her elder brother married Qin Wanru, he would definitely get the support of Qin's mansion and Duke Yang's mansion. Her elder brother would definitely rise up. When her elder brother rose up, he would naturally drive the whole Wang family and her status would also rise. At that time, she could choose any marriage she wanted. Now Qin's mansion could be regarded as a new noble with real power, and the first miss married a good man. Although it had a bad reputation, Wang Yishu thought it could be ignored. She thought so in her heart, so she refused to let go of Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru was waiting for her words. She glanced at Wang Yishu and said, "Miss Wang, I have evidence." For a moment, not only Wang Yishu was shocked, but also the surrounding people were dumbfounded. After such a long time, she actually had evidence. Looking at Qin Wanru's calm look and Wang Yishu's panicked eyes, everyone felt confused for a moment. Nonsense. How could you have evidence? Wang Yishu shouted. I do have evidence. I just want to ask why Miss Wang wants to harm me. Today is the first time we meet. Last time when Madame of Duke Xing sent someone to my mansion, she asked me and Miss Wang to take care of each other when we enter the imperial palace. Why does Miss Wang want to harm me when we meet for the first time? Qin Wanru looked at Wang Yishu and asked with her watery eyes. It was almost impossible to harm others when they met for the first time. It did not mean that Qin Wanru would not harm others. Even if she had not been there, she had seen a miss in the backyard. However, there was no grudge between them, so it was impossible for Qin Wanru to harm others. What was more, they were in the imperial palace. One mistake would lead to eternal damnation. No one would do such a thing that would harm others and oneself. Thinking about the meaning of Qin Wanru's words, everyone suddenly thought of Madame of Duke Xing. Could it be possible that Madame of Duke Xing had grudges against Qin's mansion? Otherwise, Wang Yishu would not harm others for no reason. I don't know what you mean, second Miss Qin. I really didn't harm you. This jade pendant was put in your hand before. I just saw it and asked you. Then you broke the jade pendant. If it were not for the words on it, I would not know that this jade pendant belonged to my elder brother. Looking at Qin Wanru's calm eyes, Wang Yishu was a little flustered. Her eyes flickered slightly, she avoided Qin Wanru's burning eyes, and pretended to be calm with a smile. If I can prove that this jade pendant belongs to Miss Wang, can Miss Wang tell me the fact that you set me up? Qin Wanru did not relax and asked, raising her small face with a sweet smile. Her appearance had always been outstanding. Even though she was still young, that kind of elegance and charm that came from deep within her bones was already enough to make people feel that they could not ignore her. At this time, she stared at Wang Yishu, who was a few years older than her, with a calm and steady look. Compared with Wang Yishu, whose eyes flickered, she looked more credible. Her bearing as a daughter of an aristocratic family made everyone present feel that the second Miss Qin in front of them was more credible. Is it true that she deliberately set me up? Looking at the situation in the field, someone had begun to whisper. This seems to be the case. Someone echoed. Why did Wang Yishu set up this Miss of Qin's mansion? Didn't they say that they had nothing to do with each other before? Someone doubted. Maybe it's because of Duke Xing's mansion. The words stopped here. The misses who answered and asked were both shocked. They hurriedly covered their mouths with handkerchiefs and stopped talking. Duke Xing's mansion was not a place that others could talk about casually. But when they said this, they naturally got the answer from Madame of Duke Xing. Although they did not dare to go on talking at this time, they all thought that the second Miss Qin might have offended Madame of Duke Xing, so she got into trouble today. Everyone unconsciously believed in Qin Wanru's words. Although she had not shown the evidence yet, her calm look and calm tone had been recognized by everyone. Second Miss Qin, show me the evidence, or I will sue you for slander. Hearing the whispers of the people around, Wang Yishu was really panicked and bluffed. She said loudly. Chapter 290. Everyone's eyes involuntarily fell on the fragment of the jade pendant. Looking at the fragment, they were all at a loss. They couldn't find anything on this fragment, and it was not even the fragment with words just now. Wang Yishu panicked at first, and then became overjoyed. She sneered, raised her head, and said proudly, "Second Miss Qin, it's just a fragment. How can you prove it?" Of course I can. Qin Wanru smiled slightly, waved the fragment in front of the nearest miss, and said, "Miss, do you smell anything?" "It smells very good." The miss smelled it and said honestly, "Is that Miss Wang's handkerchief? I wonder if it also smells like this." Qin Wanru squinted at the handkerchief in the hands of a miss and said, "The handkerchief with colorful yarn belonged to Wang Yishu. It smells the same." This miss also took the handkerchief and had a look at it just now. Of course, she also smelled the strong fragrance on it. At this moment, her face immediately changed, and she couldn't help exclaiming, "The handkerchief with colorful yarn belonged to Wang Yishu, and the fragrance on it also belonged to her." This jade pendant also had the same fragrance, which meant that this jade pendant had been put together with the handkerchief. Wang Yishu had always said that this jade pendant was with Qin Wanru, so her words fell through. When Qin Wanru mentioned the smell of her handkerchief, Wang Yishu seemed to be struck by lightning, and her face immediately turned pale like a piece of paper, which would be broken at any time. "Second Miss Qin, I don't understand what you are talking about. Why did I take my brother's jade pendant? Why did I secretly give it to you?" She tried to pretend to be calm, but her hands, which were clasped together, couldn't help trembling. "Miss Wang, I really don't understand what you are thinking. I don't know you or your brother. Just now you said that this jade pendant was in my hands. After you saw it, I panicked and smashed the jade pendant, and then smeared it on you. But why is the jade pendant still stained with the fragrance of your handkerchief? Your handkerchief has been taken by several misses at that time. How did the fragrance stain it?" With a touch of coldness in her watery eyes, Qin Wanru looked at Wang Yishu and said slowly. Seeing her calmness, Wang Yishu's pale face seemed to be broken in an instant. She didn't know why things became like this. Originally, he just needed to sneak the jade pendant out at this time. Later, she would find a reason to separate from Qin Wanru. Then what would happen to Qin Wanru and why the jade pendant fell from her body would have nothing to do with her. However, the jade pendant was broken when it was just sent out. Everything that happened after that was out of his control. With cold sweat on his back, he stared at Qin Wanru and said, "Second Miss Qin, I don't know what you are talking about. I'll get my aunt to judge for me." She wouldn't dare to admit it even if she died. It seemed that as long as Madame of Duke Xing came, everything could be solved, which made people feel that this matter had something to do with Madame of Duke Xing. The servant girl who followed Wang Yishu twisted her body uneasily and looked around nervously. Looking at Wang Yishu's bluff, Qin Wanru asked slowly, "Miss Wang, before I entered the palace today, I didn't even know who you are. Just now you introduced your surname as Wang. Why would I frame up a person whom I met for the first time and seem to have prepared for it? I don't know what kind of person you are. I met you for the first time today, and you set up a trap for me." Wang Yishu gnashed her teeth at this time. In any case, she didn't dare to admit it. Even in Duke Xing's mansion, if such a thing happened, her reputation would be greatly damaged, let alone in the imperial palace. At this time, she only cared about her own explanation, but did not think that what she had said before had mentioned Madame of Duke Xing. Now it was impossible not to think of Madame of Duke Xing. Wang Yishu and Qin Wanru did not know each other, but Madame of Duke Xing knew Qin Wanru. If this plan had been made long ago, it was naturally impossible for Qin Wanru to plot against Madame of Duke Xing. In any case, it was Madame of Duke Xing who plotted against Qin Wanru. But the question was, why did Madame of Duke Xing plot against a young miss from an aristocratic family who had just arrived in the capital city? This was the most puzzling part. For a moment, the tent was very quiet. All the young ladies were waiting to see how they would deal with this matter. Wang Yishu did not know that her explanation did not clear her name. Moreover, he even dragged Madame of Duke Xing into the water. "Miss Wang, when you came here just now, you secretly talked to our Mississippi. When other misses wanted to see your handkerchief, you secretly handed the thing wrapped in the handkerchief to them. Then you found an excuse to break it and frame our second Mississippi. We are in the imperial palace. Even if you are the niece of Madame of Duke Xing, you can't cover up the truth like this. Yu Jie said angrily. She reached out to pick up a fragment of the jade pendant and handed it to a servant girl beside her. Smell it. Is it the same smell as Miss Wang's handkerchief? After the servant girl smelled it, she passed it to others. For a moment, those who had smelled the handkerchief all nodded. It was indeed the same smell, and the smell was very strong. It was obvious that the handkerchief had been in Wang Yishu's hands for a long time and was definitely not wrapped in just now. That was to say, Wang Yishu should have been wrapped in the handkerchief since she entered the imperial palace, instead of seeing the jade pendant in Qin Wanru's hands just now as she said. No matter how hard Wang Yishu tried to cover it, she could not cover it up. It's so strange. Why did Miss Wang harm second Miss Qin so much? A miss began to murmur. It's really strange. How could a daughter of a poor family enter the imperial palace today? Someone doubted the reason why Wang Yishu could enter the imperial palace today. With her identity, Wang Yishu could not attend the palace banquet today. Just ask someone to find out how she entered the imperial palace today. Another person suggested. It was actually very easy to find out this kind of thing. The invitation cards to enter the imperial palace were fixed, and not everyone could get them. Whoever gave the invitation card to Wang Yishu was most likely to be involved in this matter. In fact, there was no need to find out. The missus had already known that this matter had something to do with Madam of Duke Xing. Wang Yishu should enter the imperial palace with the invitation card of Duke Xing's mansion. Hearing the voices around her, Wang Yishu was so flustered that she almost fell down. The servant girl behind her hurried over to help her and then pinched her waist hard. Wang Yishu almost screamed because of the pain. Before she screamed, she felt that the bend of her foot was kicked hard. She immediately came to her senses, closed her eyes, fell back, and passed out without saying anything. Miss. The servant girl who supported her shouted anxiously. As her hand became soft, Wang Yishu fell straight to the side, and the servant girl also fell to the ground in a panic. The fall was not light. Wang Yishu bounced a bit and passed out without saying a word. Qin Wanru saw it clearly on the side. It was the servant girl who attacked Wang Yishu before, so Wang Yishu pretended to pass out. But now Wang Yishu really passed out. She fell straight down. The servant girl didn't mean to help her at all, but directly threw her to the ground, and the back of her head hit heavily on the bluestone ground. Ah, blood. The servant girl didn't fall so badly. She rushed over, helped Wang Yishu up, and raised her head. Seeing the blood on the back of Wang Yishu's head, she screamed. In everyone's astonished eyes, seeing the blood on the back of Wang Yishu's head getting bigger, many young madams screamed in fear. Some rushed out of the door, and everyone was in a mess. The movement here had already alarmed people in the palace. A nanny in charge of the palace came over. Seeing this situation, she was so anxious that her face changed dramatically. The identity of the young madams coming from the palace today was very unusual, and they might be of a higher status. At this time, she couldn't bear the responsibility for anyone's accident. She hurriedly asked someone to help Wang Yishu out, and then asked someone to invite an imperial physician. The scene was in a mess. At this time, the empress came over with a large group of palace maids. Seeing the chaos in front of her, she immediately looked at a principal palace maid standing beside her with a cold face. The principal palace maid understood, hurriedly stepped forward and said loudly, "Here comes the empress." For a moment, everyone present knelt down and shouted, "Long live the empress!" What happened here? The empress looked coldly at the young madams from aristocratic families who knelt on the ground and said coldly. She was in a bad mood today. "Empress, this is what happened just now." Hearing the empress's question, the nanny in charge hurriedly came forward to report. When Wang Yishu was sent to the Imperial Institute of Medicine, the nanny in charge had already figured out the ins and outs of this matter. Who is this young madam from Qin's mansion? The empress glanced at everyone with gloomy eyes and asked. I kowtow to the empress. Hearing that she was mentioned, Qin Wanru hurriedly stepped forward and knelt down again to salute. You are the second miss from Qin's mansion, the one who was almost killed with Prince Chen. The Empress's eyes fell on Qin Wanru. Raise your head. This time was enough for the Empress to find out who Chu Luchen wanted to save and the reason for the accident. Yes, I am. Qin Wanru raised her head slightly and looked steadily forward. The Empress's eyes fell on Qin Wanru's face, and her eyes became deeper. After looking Qin Wanru up and down with unclear meaning, she asked, Do you know the young madam from Wang's mansion before? Empress, I don't know her. Qin Wanru replied. Since you don't know her, why did she frame you up? The Empress asked again. This. I really don't know. I only know that this jade pendant was taken out by Miss Wang herself. Feeling the burning gaze on her face, Qin Wanru became more and more cautious. Duke Xing's mansion. The Empress said in a deep tone, Do you have a grudge against Madam of Duke Xing? Qin Wanru was just an unmarried young madam, but she had a grudge against Madam of Duke Xing, a powerful minister in the imperial court. The meaning of this was enough to make people think several times. Was there really any secret behind it? How could two people who could not have a relationship with each other become enemies, let alone such a grudge? Was it possible that the incident at the gate of the palace also had something to do with Madam of Duke Xing? The Empress's guess was true. Chapter 291. Your Majesty, I don't think I have any grudge with Madam of Duke Xing. Madam of Duke Xing has always been gentle and appreciates me very much. I don't think she wants to hurt me. Qin Wanru said naturally and gracefully. Her words made the Empress silent for a while. Her eyes fell on Qin Wanru's face with a bit of coldness, as if she wanted to see whether Qin Wanru was telling the truth or lying. After a long while, the Empress said slowly, Since you have no grudge with this miss of the Wang family, and why does this miss of the Wang family plot against you? The only one related to you too is Madam of Duke Xing. Her words were gentle and even with a little smile, but Qin Wanru had a bad feeling in her heart. The Empress deliberately led to Madam of Duke Xing, and the meaning in it was not simple. Did the Empress deliberately want her to say that Madam of Duke Xing intended to deal with her? With Madam of Duke Xing's identity, how could she do anything to her now? Moreover, even if this was evidence for Wang Yishu, it was just a guess for Madam of Duke Xing, and it was a guess that could not be said. If she dared to say that this matter was related to Madam of Duke Xing in front of the Empress today, it would definitely not be a good thing. She was not sensitive to some things in the last life, but in this life, she was particularly sensitive. Your Majesty, I really don't know. Qin Wanru's long eyelashes fluttered twice, and she replied respectfully. Her answer was in line with the norm, without any bias. You really don't know, or you don't dare to say it? The Empress said with a smile, and her voice became more and more gentle. Qin Wanru's heart slowly rose. The meaning of the Empress's words was very difficult to answer. What did she mean by, don't know, and don't dare? Even if this kind of words was just a word, in front of the Empress and so many misses of aristocratic families, if she gave a slight wrong answer, she would be in endless trouble. She would deal with Madam of Duke Xing, but not at this time, not to mention that the Empress seemed to intervene strongly at this time. Your Majesty, I really don't know. Qin Wanru replied slowly. She knew that if she did something wrong at this time, she would be doomed eternally. With her repeated questions, the Empress's purpose slowly appeared in Qin Wanru's mind. Mother, let's go. A man's gloomy voice came from the Empress's side. Qin Wanru listened carefully. This voice was clearly the voice of Prince Zhou that she had heard in the Imperial Institute of Medicine before. Her heart suddenly moved. Had the matter of Prince Zhou's running horse been investigated? It seemed like they didn't find anything. She thought that Prince of Zhou might not appear today, but she didn't expect that he would enter the palace so soon. This Empress will get to the bottom of your matter. You can leave now. Seeing that she couldn't get anything from Qin Wanru and her son looked gloomy, the Empress didn't want to entangle with Qin Wanru anymore. She waved her hand to signal her to leave. Yes. Qin Wanru stood up and stepped aside, waiting for the Empress's carriage with other young madams to pass by. There was a large garden in front, facing the flower bed in the middle. The Empress did not enter the tent that half surrounded the flower bed, but led a group of people into the garden in the middle. After the Empress left, everyone relaxed and gently breathed a sigh of relief. Many young madams knew what they were going to do in the palace today. Some of them had already peeped at Prince Zhou. They found that Prince Zhou looked heroic and became more and more attracted to him. Among the three princes, Prince Yu, Prince Zhou, and Prince Xian, there seemed to be no one else but Prince Zhou who was most likely to inherit the throne in the future. After all, Prince Zhou was the only legitimate son. With such an identity, even Prince Yu was very outstanding, and he was the eldest. Most people still looked at Prince Zhou. If they could marry Prince Zhou as their concubine, they might be the queen of a country in the future. Such an identity was enough to make most of the young madams present have an unusual enthusiasm for Prince Zhou. The purpose of entering the palace today was Prince Zhou. Many young madams even thought that if they could not be the princess, it would be better to be a concubine than to marry one of the princes. Of course, there were also some who thought that Prince Yu had a good chance. After all, Prince Yu was the eldest son, and his mother's family was not weak. Some young madams had no ambition and thought that it was good to marry Prince Xian. At least, they could live in wealth and be a rich and idle prince in the future. No matter Prince Yu or Prince Zhou ascended to the throne in the future, they would not do anything to a brother who was not a threat. Thinking of this, Prince Xian was also a good chance. The aristocratic young madams present were all waiting to see this prince. As for Prince Chen, he was not within their consideration. Everyone knew that Prince Chen would not live long. With such an awkward identity, even if he was favored by the Empress Dowager, no one knew when he would die. No one was willing to be a widow, and it was possible that he would be widowed before he got married. Moreover, with such an identity, even if he lived a few more years, it would not be good for his family or himself. Almost all the young madams thought so. Therefore, as soon as the Empress left, the young madams shyly talked about the three princes in groups of 3 or 4. Although some of them did not say it, they still blushed when they heard it. As for what happened to Qin Wanru before, it was just a small episode. Qin Wanru was not famous, and she was just a young madam from an aristocratic family who had just arrived in the capital city. Qin Huayong's official rank was barely enough for his daughter to attend the banquet. Wang Yishu was not a real young madam of Duke Xing's mansion. Although everyone thought that it had something to do with Madam of Duke Xing, Qin Wanru did not think that it was Madam of Duke Xing. For these young madams, the most important thing now was not Qin Wanru's affairs, but their own affairs. The banquet had not officially begun. The Empress entered the garden and did not come out again. Although everyone was curious, they did not dare to go to the front of the garden. They just stood on the road outside the tent in 2s and 3s, talking and wandering. Not many people entered the tent. Just now Prince Zhou had come, and Prince Yu and Prince Xian should also come later. If they were in the tent, they would see them. Everyone naturally walked out of the tent. Although it was a little cold outside, everyone was willing to endure it and was in high spirits. Some of them deliberately stood in the wind gap. The wind raised their dresses, which added a bit of dreamlike beauty to them. Qin Wanru stood calmly in the crowd and did not enter the tent conspicuously. Since everyone was standing outside the tent, of course, she also stood with them. Her clothes were especially outstanding. She was covered with a layer of fine muslin, causing her skirt to flutter. Compared to the other young ladies, she was even more fairy-like, making people feel that she was as beautiful as jade. Even though she was still young, how many people could compare to her appearance? Some people were jealous, some envied, and some sneered at her. All kinds of eyes fell on Qin Wanru, but no one came forward to talk to her. Everyone was smart. The thing about Wang Yishu just now obviously had something to do with Madame of Duke Xing. Facing Madame of Duke Xing, Qin Wanru had no chance at all. No one was willing to provoke Madame of Duke Xing's disgust for Qin Wanru. Although no one said it, they all thought that Qin Wanru must have offended Madame of Duke Xing in some way, so Madame of Duke Xing treated her like this. Sister Wanru. A surprised voice suddenly sounded in Qin Wanru's ears. Qin Wanru looked up and saw Yan Shulan coming from the front with a happy face. She came late and just arrived. As soon as she entered the door, she saw Qin Wanru in the crowd and immediately greeted Qin Wanru with a smile. Sister Yan. Qin Wanru bowed with a smile. Yan Shulan reached out to pull her, looked around and said, Is it still early? Since it's still early, let's walk together. Okay. Qin Wanru nodded. They walked hand in hand along the path casually. In a place where neither of them noticed, several pairs of malicious eyes glanced at them. Someone squinted at them coldly, someone snorted coldly, and someone whispered a few words to the servant girl beside him. The servant girl turned around and ran out when no one paid attention to her. Everyone did it very calmly, as if it was the most natural thing. Even the servant girl who ran out to deliver the letter also disappeared in the crowd. The crowd suddenly stirred again. Someone was saying that Prince Yu had come, and Prince Yu had come. A large group of misses from aristocratic families stood there more and more gracefully, and their eyes turned over with shyness. In the opposite direction of Qin Wanru's departure, two handsome princes were coming here together, and there were several noble ladies with unusual identities with them. A group of people walked over slowly under the jealous and envious eyes of many misses, and then entered the garden where the empress entered. Although Qin Wanru and Yan Shulan also heard the noise, they didn't want to join in the fun, so they continued to walk along the winding path. On both sides of the path, pots of exquisite and enchanting Tang Qianyan were in full bloom. They stopped from time to time and enjoyed it. At this time, the plum blossoms were blooming, and it was really delightful to see this kind of different color. Did something happen just now? When they were far away from the crowd, Yan Shulan tilted her head and asked. It doesn't matter. It's just a trifle. Qin Wanru shook her head and said with a smile. She didn't want Yan Shulan to be involved in what happened just now. Is there anything I can do for you? Yan Shulan asked. Qin Wanru shook her hand and said, You don't have to worry about it. Wang Yishu is not such a person at ordinary times. How could she do such a thing? Yan Shulan said in confusion. She was not ignorant. On the way here, many people were talking about this matter, so she had heard some of it and understood the general meaning of the matter. Looking at Yan Shulan's confused and worried eyes, Qin Wanru felt warm in her heart. She held Yan Shulan's hand and said with a smile, It happened in the palace, so Wang Yishu can't deny it even if she wants to. I heard that she was sent to the imperial physician. Yan Shulan frowned and said, I don't know what the empress thinks. Such a person deserves to die. Does she want to? Chapter 292. Yan Shulan nodded repeatedly. At this time, she also remembered that this was the imperial palace, which was not a place where she could speak casually. Even if she spoke softly, she could not guarantee that no one would hear it. If it was spread that she was disrespectful to the empress, it would be a big crime. Seeing that she understood, Qin Wanru put down her hand and looked around. Seeing that there were only 2 rows of flowers around and no other big trees around, she breathed a sigh of relief when she found that no one was around. Seeing that Qin Wanru was so cautious, Yan Shulan increasingly felt that she was reckless just now and felt a little sorry. I made a slip of the tongue just now. Something bad almost happened. Fortunately, there is no one here. Qin Wanru said softly and looked into the distance quietly with her watery eyes. Seeing that several palace maids passed by in the distance, but none of them came close, she was slightly relieved. Many things happened in the imperial palace today. The empress seemed to be looking for a scapegoat. She did not want to run into the muzzle at this time. When I entered the imperial palace, something happened too. I was framed and almost lost my life. Prince Chen saved me, but he fainted. Now he is still in the Imperial Institute of Medicine, and the Empress Dowager is guarding there. The horse that had an accident was from Prince Zhou's mansion. Qin Wanru said implicitly and warned Yan Shulan in a low voice. With such an accident, the Empress would definitely not be in a good mood at today's banquet. Yan Shulan understood the meaning of Qin Wanru's words and immediately gasped. This was much more serious than what Qin Wanru had encountered just now. With this, no one would care about Wang Yishu's matter. Has Prince Chen woken up? Yan Shulan asked anxiously. Everyone in the capital city knew that the Empress Dowager doted on Prince Chen. If something really happened to this sick prince, the whole capital city would inevitably be in chaos. He has woken up. Qin Wanru whispered. Fortunately. Yan Shulan breathed a sigh of relief. With such an accident happening before the banquet, none of the aristocratic young madams attending the banquet today could escape. They would definitely be interrogated one by one. It was God's blessing that they could escape. Are you all right? Yan Shulan suddenly remembered that Qin Wanru said this accident was related to her, and immediately asked with concern. I'm fine. Prince Chen pleaded for me. Qin Wanru shook her head, picked up a nearby petal, and played with it thoughtfully in her hand. Then who would want to hurt Prince Chen? Could it be? Yan Shulan covered her mouth tightly as she said this, as if she was afraid that she would suddenly say something inappropriate. She was tongue-tied and didn't dare to say anything else. She faintly felt that cold sweat began to appear on her forehead. Prince Chen's identity was too special. He could be called the Crown Prince, especially when the Emperor didn't appoint another Crown Prince. His identity could affect the whole situation. Even Yan Shulan, who had been in the boudoir for a long time, knew it. Qin Wanru bit her lips and was speechless for a while. Everyone thought that it was a conspiracy against Chu Luchen, but only she knew that it was against her. The reason why Chu Luchen fainted was that she was rolled by the whip and hit him. It was actually Chu Luchen who was in trouble. However, everyone magnified this matter infinitely and thought that someone wanted to hurt Chu Luchen. Even the Empress Dowager and the Empress thought so. This was also an important reason why Prince Zhou left in a hurry before. But now, she couldn't explain this misunderstanding. She was not the only one who was plotting against it. The Empress's meaning to her just now also made Qin Wanru have a bold guess. Logically speaking, the banquet was hosted by the Empress, so she certainly didn't want any accident to happen. In particular, Duke Xing's mansion was involved in it. Naturally, she wanted to turn a big problem into a small one and a small one into nothing. How could she deliberately lead it in that direction? This was obviously to divert everyone's attention. The matter between Qin Wanru and Wang Yishu was too small. Such a trivial matter could be changed because of Qin Wanru's involvement, and Qin Wanru was involved in the matter of Chu Luchen fainting. To sum up all this, Qin Wanru judged that the Empress meant to make her matter bigger and then suppress the matter of Chu Luchen. If Qin Wanru continued to say what the Empress said just now, she would inevitably become a political victim in the end. Not everyone could point out Duke Xing's mansion as they wanted. With hundreds of thoughts in her mind in an instant, Qin Wanru had made a decision in her heart. This matter should be based on Chu Liuchen's consideration. She was not in a hurry to deal with Madame of Duke Xing. Moreover, even if she didn't say anything today, the rumor that Madame of Duke Xing didn't like her had been spread out. In this case, if Madame of Duke Xing showed too much affection to her in front of others in the future, it would also be suspicious. As for Wang Yishu's matter, if she didn't smash the jade pendant first today, there must be a follow-up, and it would be a follow-up that she couldn't explain even 100 times. That was to say, there must be a follow-up of Wang Yishu. Now those people were hiding in the dark because Wang Yishu's matter happened suddenly. Madame of Duke Xing was so powerful that she even had people in the palace. These people might be people in the palace or misses of various mansions. Sister Yen, this matter has not been spread out yet. You should pretend that you know nothing about it. Qin Wanru whispered. Don't worry. I will not talk nonsense. I will be more careful. Understanding what Qin Wanru meant, Yen Shulan put down her hand and said cautiously. While talking, a palace maid suddenly ran over in a hurry. Seeing Yen Shulan, she was relieved and hurried forward to say, Miss Yen, Zhaoi asked you to behave yourself in the palace today and don't make trouble. Her words were very incomprehensible, but Qin Wanru and Yen Shulan both understood it. Yes, I got it. Yen Shulan and Qin Wanru looked at each other and nodded. Zhaoi asked you to go there, and she has something to tell you. The palace maid didn't leave. Looking at Qin Wanru beside her, she said to Yen Shulan calmly. It meant that Yen Shulan's promise was useless, and she had to go to Zhaoi Yen. This. Yen Shulan hesitated. Sister Yen, you go there. Maybe Zhaoi Yen has something important to tell you. Qin Wanru knew her scruples and said with a smile. Most of the misses in the meeting didn't know what had happened outside the palace gate, but the astute concubines in the palace had already known it. They were afraid that their juniors would be ignorant and get into trouble with the empress. Many of them, like Zhaoi Yen, called their juniors to go there and tell them something. On the surface, it was still a cheerful atmosphere, but secretly, because of Chu Liuchen's injury, there was a storm brewing. Since Qin Wanru said so, Yen Shulan glanced at her gratefully, and then left with the palace maids and servant girls, leaving Qin Wanru alone on the path. Qin Wanru continued to turn the road ahead. Miss, was Miss Wang really sent by Madame of Duke Xing? Looking around and making sure there was no one, Yujie stepped forward and stood behind Qin Wanru. She hadn't had a chance to talk to Qin Wanru in private until now. It should be. Qin Wanru said slowly, with a trace of coldness in her watery eyes. Why is Madame of Duke Xing so vicious? Does she dislike you so much? She even showed that she liked you very much before. Yujie said angrily. Others didn't see Madame of Duke Xing's kindness to Qin Wanru, but how could she not see it? Thinking that Madame of Duke Xing, who looked gentle and dignified, turned out to be such a woman with a kind face but evil heart, Yujie felt very disgusted. Qin Wanru raised the corner of her red lips, and her eyes became more and more cold. Madame of Duke Xing wouldn't let her go, and she wouldn't let this woman go either. She would never forget the blood hatred of 2 lives. She reached out and rubbed her forehead. In the last life, she should also be schemed by Madame of Duke Xing and became Wang Xingshua's co-wife. In this life, Madame of Duke Xing wanted to use this trick again. The last life was the last life. This time, she, who had returned bloodthirsty, would not be manipulated by her. One day, I will get them all back. Qin Wanru's voice was very indifferent, and there was even a slight smile on her face. However, her voice and smile were with a trace of coldness, which chilled her heart. Miss, what will happen to Miss Wang? Yujie was not afraid of Qin Wanru's expression. Of course, the more powerful her miss was, the better. After thinking for a while, she said angrily, she obviously pretended to faint just now, but the last hit was not light, so she should really faint. Her words made Qin Wanru burst into laughter. She didn't expect that she would end up like this. Madame of Duke Xing will kill her. The result of this matter was definitely not what Wang Yishu could imagine. If Madame of Duke Xing wouldn't bear the consequences, she could only bear it herself, but she couldn't bear it herself. Things had changed so much, and Madame of Duke Xing didn't seem to be the kind of person who would be captured without putting up a fight. She would definitely deal with it. The best result of this matter was that Wang Yishu died. If Wang Yishu hit the wall and died, Madame of Duke Xing could even blame her for it. Yujie was startled. Miss, if Miss Wang really dies in an accident, it will definitely fall on you in the end. Madame of Duke Xing will definitely not let it go and will definitely put the blame on you. It doesn't matter. After all, this is the Imperial Palace. Even if Madame of Duke Xing can bribe many people, there won't be many. Qin Wanru smiled slightly and said meaningfully. Madame of Duke Xing would reach out, but she had already attracted the attention of the Empress Dowager. The palace maid beside the Empress Dowager would definitely report the dispute between her and Wang Yishu to the Empress Dowager. Chu Luqian was injured, and the Empress Dowager would be extremely nervous. Even the slightest disturbance would definitely attract people's attention, not to mention that Wang Yishu was still in the Imperial Institute of Medicine. Coincidentally, the Empress Dowager was also there. At this time, something interesting might have happened. Now she just needed to wait and see. In the last life, Madame of Duke Xing was extremely powerful, and her daughter also had a great ambition. She trampled Qin Wanru to death for better power. From this, it could be known that Duke Xing's mansion had lackeys in the imperial palace. Chapter 293. Today's banquet seemed to be splendid on the surface, but in fact, it was turbulent. And the crux of the problem was actually the daughter of Ningyuan army general, which was something that no one expected. The Empress and her son were sitting in the room. Beside them were two personal old maids and a personal eunuch of Prince Zhou. The rest of the people were waiting quietly outside the door. "You found nothing?" the Empress said coldly with a dark face. "Mother, I found nothing. I only found the family where the coachman used to work. But that family is just an ordinary merchant, and it is not in the capital city now." Prince Zhou raised his eyebrows, and there was a faint cold light in his eyes. How could he not be angry? He left the palace and went straight back to his mansion, but he was still one step late. The coachman actually hanged himself because of fear. Who would believe this reason? There is no trace left. The Empress was angry and asked again. "Mother, I really don't know who put a nail in my mansion and put their hands into Prince Zhou's mansion." Prince Zhou angrily patted the armrest of the chair. He always thought that his Prince Zhou's mansion was an iron bucket, but now he found that the secret had been leaked. If it were not for Chu Luqian today, he would not even know when he would die. As long as he thought of this, the anger in his heart rushed up. He was Prince Zhou, the legitimate son of the Empress, and also the future crown prince. How could he not be angry when someone laid their hands on him? "Mother, when I go back, I will directly ask someone to investigate the 9 clans of the coachman. Even if he has no parents, I will kill all his clans." Prince Zhou said with a face full of anger. Don't do it first." The Empress stretched out her hand to stop him and said, "You directly report this to your father. You go to your father and cry to him. Just say that someone secretly released the coachman in your Prince Zhou's mansion with the purpose of secretly killing you. Your father, please save your life." "Okay, I will go in a moment." "Mother, who do you think did this to me?" Prince Zhou nodded and frowned tightly with a dark look on his face. "The invalid is dead, and you're blamed. Whoever benefits the most from this matter is the one who wants to kill him," the Empress said gloomily. Her only son was actually plotted against under her eyes. How could the Empress not be angry? At this time, she also had the intention to kill Chu Luyue. Zhou Wang gnashed his teeth. "We can't deny that it's not Chu Liuxin. Concubine Ming is not a quiet person. She thinks that she has hope after giving birth to a son. She doesn't know who she is. How dare she think too much?" The queen's face was full of resentment. Her appearance was not the most outstanding, and in this situation, her entire person was filled with coldness and hatred. After being in the palace for so many years, she had long become indifferent. But now there were only her confidants and her son, so she didn't care anymore. "Mother, I understand now." Prince of Zhou immediately understood what the Empress meant. Mother and son always had the same mind. After calming down a little, he said, "Mother, I don't understand what the daughter of Ningyuan army general's mansion means. Chu Luqian didn't look like a person who would save people casually. Why did those people conclude that Chu Luchen would definitely reach out to save people? This was also the thing that Prince of Zhou couldn't figure out. Others didn't know what kind of person Chu Luchen was, but how could he not know? Although Chu Luchen had always appeared to be very harmless in front of his father and grandmother, he was ruthless and ruthless. Even if unrelated people died in front of him, he would not look up. If Chu Luchen's body had not been predicted by all imperial physicians that he would not live long, Prince of Zhou would definitely regard him as the greatest enemy of his life. Not Chu Luiyue, not Chu Liuxin, only Chu Luchen. Prince of Zhou felt it was ridiculous that a person like him would reach out to save people because of kindness. Unless Qin Wanru had something to do with him. Do you still remember that Chu Luchen left the capital city before? The Empress picked up the teacup at hand, took a sip, and said slowly. I remember that at that time, Chu Luiyue and Chu Liuxin wanted to chase after him, but when they just went there, Chu Luchen had already returned. It was said that they chased after nothing. Prince of Zhou raised the corner of his mouth sarcastically. Although he didn't go to this matter, he also secretly inquired about a lot of news. Chu Luchen had been in the capital city for a long time, and one day he unexpectedly wanted to take action. All forces paid attention to his whereabouts. It could be said that every time he went, the news of his behavior and address would be sent to the capital city. Even if he was sick, many people dared not take it lightly. Especially his behavior this time was so abnormal. That time when he was in Jiangzhou, he once lived in Ningyuan Army General's mansion, and he should have met second Miss Qin. The Empress gave a conclusion. Will he lend a helping hand if he knows her? Prince of Zhou was quite disapproving. Or it can be said that he not only knows her, but also has a good impression of Ningyuan Army General's daughter. Prince of Zhou, have you forgotten what your grandmother asked you to do today? The Empress reminded him. Fall in love. Prince of Zhou was stunned for a moment, and then said in surprise, does Chu Luchen fall in love with the Miss of Qin's mansion? But she is really too young, isn't she? Just now, Chu Liuzhou also saw Qin Wanru's appearance. She was indeed beautiful, and at such a young age, she already had a beauty that could topple cities. But after all, she was a little young. Although Prince of Zhou thought Qin Wanru was beautiful, he didn't feel that he admired her. Compared with other misses of aristocratic families, Qin Wanru was young and childish. Even if she looked exquisite, Prince of Zhou felt that he wouldn't have any feelings for her. You don't, but it doesn't mean that Chu Luchen doesn't. The Miss of Qin's mansion must be very beautiful. If she grows up in the future, she may become a stunning beauty. The Empress had seen a lot of beauties, but when she saw Qin Wanru's appearance just now, she also felt amazed. Grow up in the future. Isn't it still a long time? Moreover, he doesn't want a ready-made beauty, but expects her to grow up in the future. How ignorant is Chu Luchen to think so? Prince Zhou sneered and ridiculed Chu Liuchen's taste. He deeply felt that Chu Luchen had brought shame to the royal family. The royal family could have all kinds of beauties, but Chu Luchen actually expected a girl who had not yet grown up. You don't have to worry about that. You just need to know that this woman is not ordinary in Chu Liuchen's eyes. The Empress's eyes suddenly lit up. Mother, why don't I choose her and give her the position of concubine, so that Chu Luchen won't care about her? Zhou Wang suddenly smiled proudly. Anyway, he can't choose today. If I choose today, it's too late for him to want it. Prince Zhou had always been at a disadvantage in front of Chu Luchen. At this moment, he suddenly felt that this idea was very good. He just wanted to make Chu Luchen unhappy, and it was better to make him die of anger. Don't provoke Chu Luchen. The Empress directly denied Prince Zhou's idea. Why not? Mother, will Chu Luchen really fight with me for a woman? Moreover, so what if it was a real fight? How can a sickly person defeat me? She thought of how Chu Luchen had deliberately provoked her in the past. Zhou Wang was furious about the matter that made him angry. He felt that he had to fight for it. Just because he is a sickly person, he can do anything. A woman won't make him care much, but if he wants to fight for it, there is nothing he can't do. The Empress's face darkened. She thought of something. Until now, every time she thought of it, she would be flustered. She even felt it was a taboo to see Chu Luchen and didn't dare to provoke him easily. At that time, it was also Prince Zhou who angered Chu Luchen because of a palace maid. At that time, Chu Luchen, who was still young, picked up a vase beside him and smashed it hard on Chu Liuzhou without thinking. Seeing that it was not good, the palace maids around hurriedly came to pull them apart. Chu Luchen fell to the ground and spat out blood. But even so, he still picked up the broken pieces of the vase and smashed them hard on Prince Zhou. Prince Zhou was also scared at that time. After being hit by several pieces of vase, he cried out in pain. The Empress came over and asked someone to hold Chu Luchen. Chu Luchen rolled on the ground like a madman and bumped into the Empress with blood all over his body. The Empress was frightened by his bloody and ferocious face at that time. She could only watch helplessly as Chu Luchen bumped into her and she fell into the broken porcelain pieces. He is a madman, he is a madman. Prince Zhou also thought of the past. His hands couldn't help trembling and his eyes were tight. For Prince Zhou, this matter was also a lifelong memory. Since then, he did not dare to provoke Chu Luchen. As the legitimate son of the Empress, he had never given in to anyone but Chu Luchen. He had to give in to Chu Luchen and he did not dare to refuse. This person was a madman. If he was annoyed, he could really do anything. What happened when he was a child was finally left unsettled. The palace maid who caused the trouble was beaten to death by Chu Luchen himself and then sent to Chu Liuzhou's mansion. Chu Liuzhou was so scared that he didn't dare to go out at night for a period of time. As soon as he went out, he saw the bloody face of the palace maid. The legitimate prince was beaten and the Empress was injured. In the end, this matter was left unsettled under the mediation of the Emperor and the Empress Dowager. Both the Empress and Prince Zhou understood the meaning of this. A fall into the pit, a gain in your wit. They really did not dare to offend Chu Luchen casually. Chu Luchen knew that he wouldn't live long, so he dared to do anything, but they really didn't dare to. Thinking of this, Prince Zhou couldn't help shivering, and then there was a look of shame and anger on his face. He was Prince Zhou, the future emperor of a country. It was really shameful that he was afraid of a patient. But he also knew that he had to bear it at this time. When he got the throne in the future, he would definitely make this patient kneel in front of him and beg for mercy. Otherwise, he would be cut into pieces and see if he still dared to be arrogant with him. Since the maid of Qin's mansion has a relationship with Chu Luchen, I will help her investigate what happened at the banquet today. What does Madame of Duke Xing want to do? She is just a little girl. Why does Madame of Duke Xing need to do anything? The Empress took a deep breath and suppressed a trace of scarlet in her eyes. Mother, is it possible that the groom in my mansion also has a relationship with Duke Xing's mansion? Otherwise, how could it be so coincidental that the maid of Qin's mansion got involved in it before and after? But if the maid didn't mention it, we wouldn't know that Madame of Duke Xing also got involved in it. Prince Zhou suddenly said with a whimsical idea. Chapter 294. Does it have something to do with Duke Xing's mansion? The Empress's face was as gloomy as water. It seemed that something was gathering in her body, gloomy and cold. Mother, it's really hard to say. Otherwise, with Madame of Duke Xing's status, why would she deal with a miss from an aristocratic family from a small place? Prince Zhou also said with a cold look. The two of them stopped talking at the same time. The room was filled with a dull atmosphere. This was a problem that neither of them had thought of, so they couldn't digest it for a while. Duke Xing was a kind person. Although he had a high position, he was a good person in the past. Besides, he was smooth and slick. It seemed that he didn't offend anyone, but it seemed that he didn't take any side. The Empress and Prince Zhou and his son had repeatedly tried to draw him over to their side, but he refused them every time and said that he was loyal to the emperor. In turn, it meant that no matter who sat in the position of the emperor, he was loyal to the emperor. He could be regarded as a loyal minister and didn't take any side. Although the Empress and her son were unhappy, they thought it was good. At least Duke Xing wouldn't have anything to do with others. But what did the current situation mean? Could it be that Duke Xing's mansion had made a move? Secretly send someone into Duke Xing's mansion to investigate. After a long while, the Empress said with a gloomy face. No matter whether this matter was really related or not, the Empress felt that she must pay attention to Duke Xing's mansion. No one expected that the banquet, which seemed to be held in a grand manner, would end up being so plain. It passed quickly. No one performed on the flower bed that had been set up. The Empress came over when the banquet began, and then left early with Prince Zhou. Prince Yu and Prince Xian just sat for a while. After turning a blind eye to the affectionate and shy eyes of the misses from aristocratic families, they also left. As for Prince Chen, who was said to be dead or alive, they didn't even see him. The news that the banquet was secretly spread among aristocratic families to select concubines for several princes this time disappeared silently, as if the rumor that had excited the aristocratic families before had never happened. Before the banquet started, it was lively, and after the banquet started, it was calm. The reason why it was like this was because the other things that happened were too shocking, and no one paid attention to the feelings of these young men and women. First of all, someone tried to assassinate Prince Chen at the gate of the imperial palace with the horse of Prince Zhou's mansion. The groom committed suicide immediately after returning to Prince Zhou's mansion. Later, Prince Zhou knelt in front of the imperial study to ask for forgiveness, and the Empress came with him to ask for forgiveness. Then there was the assassination of Prince Yu, which suddenly happened on his way back to his mansion from the palace. At that time, not only Prince Yu but also Prince Xian were in the carriage. The two princes were injured. Fortunately, the guards risked their lives to save them so that they could escape back to the palace. What was even more surprising was that when Prince Zhou was in his mansion at night, he was also assassinated. One by one, the princes were sent to the Imperial Physician Institute. The imperial physicians were all panic-stricken. These were the sons and grandsons of the royal family. If anything happened to any of them, they would not be able to bear the consequences. Moreover, these princes were seriously injured, so the emperor temporarily ordered them to stay in the Imperial Physician Institute. Every day, half of the imperial physicians were on duty in the Imperial Physician Institute. No one dared to take it lightly at this time. The emperor was shocked and furious when his sons got into trouble one after another. The whole capital city was under martial law. No one dared to gossip on the street for fear of offending the taboo of the royal family. When people met each other, they only dared to talk about things like the weather and did not dare to spread any rumors unjustly. Wang Yishu's matter was quietly buried. In this case, no one cared about the dispute between an unknown young lady from an aristocratic family. Although it happened in the imperial palace, there were more things to investigate in the imperial palace at this time. The matter between such a woman's backyard was too trivial. But it was not that no one cared about it. The imperial physicians of the Imperial Physician Institute had a headache. Since Miss Wang Yishu was sent to the Imperial Physician Institute, she had been placed casually in a corner, but she had been unconscious and could not be saved no matter how hard they tried. The imperial physicians had no choice but to ask Duke Xing's mansion to take her away. But now things happened in the imperial palace one after another, so she was left idle in a corner. Anyway, she was not the real miss of Duke Xing's mansion. In this case, no one cared about her life or death. And Duke Xing's mansion had not sent anyone to pick her up. Therefore, in a corner of the Imperial Physician Institute, Miss Wang had been unconscious for 2 days. Chu Luchen was the first to arrive at the Imperial Physician Institute, so he naturally occupied the best courtyard in the Imperial Physician Institute. There was incense burning in the room, and the curling ambergris could only be provided by the royal family. This refreshing and tranquilizing fragrance came from a jade-colored animal swallow at the window, clear and indifferent. Chu Luchen leaned against a soft couch, looking very lazy. He slightly raised his handsome eyes and looked out of the window. It was a good weather outside the window. The sunshine was good, and it shone through the window, making him look more lively. Only Xiao Xuanzi accompanied him in the room, and the others were guarding outside the courtyard. It seemed that there were not many people outside the courtyard, but in fact, there were many guards hiding in the dark. Everyone stared at these courtyards nervously, for fear that something would go wrong. The princes of the emperor were all in the Imperial Physician Institute. If something really happened, no one could bear the responsibility. How are their injuries? Chu Luchen asked with gentle eyes. Prince Zhou is seriously injured, but the other two are fine. They just have some scratches. Xiao Xuanzi curled his lips disdainfully. He had thought it was a big deal after making such a big noise, but it was just a scratch. Chu Liuzhou is seriously injured. Chu Luchen was very careless. He reached out and elegantly picked up a book to read. Xiao Xuanzi secretly opened it. It turned out to be a medical book, and it seemed to be the kind of rare book. Didn't I dislike this kind of medical book the most? When did I change my hobby? Prince Zhou is really seriously injured. He is still lying on the bed and can't get up. The Empress has come to see him several times, and she is very sad every time. Xiao Xuanzi reported. Where is he hurt? Chu Luchen asked calmly. He turned his eyes and looked gentle and harmless. It is said that he hurt his arm. He was severely stabbed by a sword, and now he can't raise his hand. It's really good. Chu Luchen said meaningfully. Master, what do you mean? Xiao Xuanzi asked carefully. I don't mean anything. I just think it's good that the water is mixed. Chu Luchen seemed to be in a good mood. He turned his eyes and smiled elegantly. Master, if the banquet can't be held, can't you get a princess? Xiao Xuanzi blinked and asked. I don't need a princess. Chu Luchen seemed to be in a good mood. He picked up the medical book in his hand and patted it on the table twice, and said with a smile. Master, didn't you tell the Empress Dowager that you thought the second Miss Qin was good? Besides, didn't you try your best to save the second miss that day? Xiao Xuanzi felt confused. He raised his head and plucked up his courage to ask his master in surprise. Others didn't know the situation that day, but Xiao Xuanzi knew that his master asked the guards to save the second Miss Qin. Originally, his carriage was in the back. Hearing that the front was blocked, and the second Miss Qin's carriage was in the front, his master got off the carriage and walked forward slowly. His master also saw clearly what happened to the old beggar outside the crowd. After the servant girl and the coachman left, the horse galloped over. His master asked the bodyguard to save the second Miss Qin, but he also ordered the bodyguard to pull the second Miss Qin to him. Thus, the second Miss Qin bumped into his master and made him faint. In Xiao Xuanzi's view, all this was the intention of his master to like the second Miss Qin. But in the end, his master didn't want to marry the princess. Then why did he do all this? Xiao Xuanzi was a little eunuch. He had been in the palace since he was a child and had been with Chu Luchen since he was a child. He was Chu Liuchen's confidant. But he really didn't understand what his master was thinking this time. He made such a big scene and almost got himself into trouble. But in the end, it was all bark and no bite. Xiao Xuanzi felt that he suffered a loss. This time, something really happened to the prince. With the prince's poor health, such a bump would really cause a big accident. That day, Xiao Xuanzi was so scared that he almost fainted. But it happened suddenly. His master ordered the guards to do so. Xiao Xuanzi didn't have time to object. When he saw Chu Luchen fainted on the ground, Xiao Xuanzi would have been scared out of his wits if he hadn't been rational. This kind of thing couldn't be joked. I'm still young. I don't want any princess. Chu Luchen said lightly. he didn't feel Xiao Xuanzi's various messy thoughts. But you said to the Empress Dowager that you liked the second Miss Qin. Xiao Xuanzi repeated with a sad face. So what? Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows. The second Miss Qin is so outstanding. If I really don't like her, I'm afraid she will be chosen by the other princes. Xiao Xuanzi felt that it was better to hint his master from another aspect. No matter how he looked at his master didn't seem to be enlightened. He was really not as good as a little eunuch like him. But thinking of his master's health, Xiao Xuanzi suddenly understood. The beautiful palace maid sent by the Empress Dowager and the Empress were directly thrown out. Some of them even lost their heads. It seemed that he had to find a way to let his master accept the teaching of such palace maids who knew about human affairs. They dare not choose my maid. Chu Luchen smiled gently and innocently. When the sun fell on his face, he was as handsome and elegant as a banished immortal from heaven. If only looking at his face, no one would think that the handsome young man in front of them was so terrible. The meaning of his words was even more tyrannical and unruly. Xiao Xuanzi also trembled. Looking at his master's handsome face, he suddenly understood. It turned out that his master had already expected all this. What do you mean, master? Xiao Xuanzi bowed his head and smiled. See if the one over there is dead. If not, throw her out. I'm upset. Chapter 295. Wang Yishu was carried out of the palace by two eunuchs in an ostentatious manner. The reason why she was not allowed to stay in the palace was because the people in the imperial hospital were all descendants of the emperor. She was just a little girl from an aristocratic family who had framed others, so why should she stay? The reason why she stayed for a few more days was that she was still unconscious. But even though she was unconscious, when the two eunuchs carried her out, they directly threw her at the palace gate. Then, they left her lying at the palace gate, and the two eunuchs swaggered off. The people outside the palace didn't know what had happened. They thought that it was Fei Bin who had committed a crime. Later, they found out that it was just a girl from an aristocratic family who had fainted. However, she was thrown at the gate so casually. It was obvious that she wasn't a good person. The carriage of Xing Country's mansion arrived not long after. Two old maids came up and carried Wang Yishu into the carriage. After that, the carriage left. However, even though the carriage of Duke Xing's mansion moved fast, the matter about Wang Yishu was still exposed in the aristocratic families. The assassination of several princes couldn't be mentioned casually, and the matter about Wang Yishu had been buried because of the assassination of the princes. But as Wang Yishu was thrown at the gate of the imperial palace, the matter unexpectedly spread like a ferment. Many misses had seen this. Wang Yishu did plot against the second miss of Qin's mansion, but they had never met before. Why did they have a dispute? Moreover, they even dared to launch an attack in the palace. How could they hate each other? How could they hate each other? Wang Yishu didn't want to kill the second miss of Qin's mansion. The sharp aristocratic families in the capital city even thought that this matter had something to do with the murder of Prince Chen. For a moment, Duke Xing's mansion, which had always been stable in the capital city, gradually came into the public's sight. Before that, everyone had thought that even though the princes had stirred up trouble in private, Duke Xing's mansion had obviously not been involved in it. But judging from the actions of the imperial palace today, could it be that Duke Xing's mansion had been involved in it long ago? Was that why there was such a scene at the palace gate? Did he offend the nobles in the palace by throwing it at the door? As Wang Yishu was thrown out of the palace gate, everyone turned their attention to Duke Xing's mansion. At this time, any slight disturbance could arouse everyone's vigilance, even Duke Xing's mansion, which was the least likely to get involved in this kind of thing. In Duke Xing's mansion, Gongzheng Xing, who was laughing like a lump of dough, was thundering. What the hell is going on? Duke Xing said in a stern voice. His cold eyes fell on Madame of Duke Xing opposite him with a cold look. On the way to the court today, Duke Xing received many doubtful gazes. Some of his good friends in the past did not approach him at this time. Instead, they seemed to be afraid that he would approach and talk to them. This made Duke Xing very surprised. He secretly inquired about it, and the result made him so angry that he almost vomited blood. She finally went to the court with a smile on her face. When she got home, she couldn't suppress her anger and went directly to Madame of Duke Xing's room. "Duke, don't be angry. Who knew that Yi Shu was so useless?" Madame of Duke Xing's face also darkened. When the imperial palace sent someone to pick up Wang Yishu, she knew that it was not good. She had planned to tell the empress secretly after the matter was over and then take Wang Yishu away. Who would have thought that the palace would directly inform her to pick him up, and that they would even carry him to the palace gates and leave him there? "You're just a little girl. What do you want?" Duke Xing, who had never cared about the affairs of the backyard, couldn't help saying angrily at this time, and slapped the table hard with his fat hand. Madame of Duke Xing was a capable woman. In the past, Duke Xing didn't need to worry about the affairs of the backyard, but this time she made such a big trouble. "You can't let that girl live," Madame of Duke Xing said with a cold and resentful face. "What kind of waves can a little girl stir up? Is it worthwhile for you to meddle with her again and again? She is just a miss from a family with a third-grade official position, and has nothing to do with the past." Duke Xing said disapprovingly, frowning tightly and looking sullen. He had every reason to be so angry. This matter was not only a matter of the inner court, but also involved the previous court. Duke Xing's mansion, which had originally kept a low profile, was also noticed by others. At this time, it was difficult to hide this matter when it was noticed by others, which was not a good thing for Duke Xing's mansion. "We can't let that girl live. She will definitely be a scourge if she lives." Madame of Duke Xing gritted her teeth and refused to give in. Do you know how to be in charge? If you don't, I will find someone to help you." Seeing that Madame of Duke Xing still disobeyed his words, Duke Xing was furious and couldn't hold back anymore. He glared at Madame of Duke Xing and said angrily. Seeing Duke Xing scolding her, Madame of Duke Xing suddenly couldn't help screaming, "You stop me again and again. Is it because of her? That woman is crazy, she is crazy, you. Shut up." Duke Xing was so shocked that he stood up abruptly and grabbed Madame of Duke Xing's neck. He used so much strength that Madame of Duke Xing almost passed out. Several trusted subordinates in the room were trembling with fear and shrank their heads, for fear that they would be noticed by the couple, but no one dared to go forward to persuade them. Madame of Duke Xing grabbed Duke Xing's hand with her sharp nails fiercely, causing him to cry out in pain and relax his hand. Madame of Duke Xing glared at Duke Xing with her face and neck flushed. She gritted her teeth and the hatred in her eyes was so intense that it almost covered the sky and the earth. But she unconsciously lowered her voice. "How dare you still think about her? How dare you still think about her? She couldn't help but want to curse. This way of cursing was completely contrary to her years of upbringing, but she still couldn't help it. The strong jealousy in her heart almost burned her whole body. At this moment, she even forgot that Duke Xing had grabbed her neck fiercely just now. "Shut up. If you don't want to implicate our son and daughter, don't say anything." Duke Xing's face was also livid, but he didn't dare to raise his voice. The couple glared at each other as if the other was not the closest person to them. The look in their eyes could almost be regarded as hatred. After a long while, the two of them calmed down and sat in the chairs again. Duke Xing picked up Madame of Duke Xing's handkerchief, casually wrapped it around his hand a few times, and asked with a gloomy face, "What should we do about it? What else can we do?" "It's up to you," Madame of Duke Xing said with a look of complete abandonment. "Give Wang Yishu some medicine and let her lie in bed. It is said that after she wakes up, she will fall ill and die," Duke Xing said in a gloomy voice. The key to this matter was Wang Yishu. Fortunately, it could be remedied. After all, Wang Yishu was not the daughter of Duke Xing's mansion, but a relative. After all, she only has one life. Should she stay ill, until she dies? Madame of Duke Xing, who had calmed down, was a little hesitant. It was not because she was kind, but because she was afraid that she would be involved in this matter. Do you want her to stay in Duke Xing's mansion? Since you asked her to set up the person in Qin's mansion, you should first think about what to do after the good thing fails. If you keep Wang Yishu alive in our mansion now, it will only make people more curious about why she did such a thing. Your daughter will come back. If you are not afraid of delaying your daughter's future, let her stay. Duke Xing stood up, snorted coldly, turned around, flicked his sleeves, and left. That's it. Thinking of her precious daughter, Madame of Duke Xing immediately made a decision. She immediately stood up to make this decision. Looking at Duke Xing's back, her face became colder and colder. Her daughter, who had been raised like a precious pearl, was not comparable to Wang Yishu and Qin Wanru, who were so despicable. Even if she was scratched a little, she would make these despicable things pay for it with their lives. Although Wang Yishu had been raised by her since she was a child, she could not compare with her biological daughter. Her daughter was a cloud high in the ninth heaven, while Wang Yishu and Qin Wanru were just the mud under her feet. How could they compare with her daughter? She would not lose her daughter's reputation because of them. Nanny Sheng, get some medicine for Ishu later and let her lie in bed every day. With her current reputation, even if she can recover, it is impossible for her to have a good marriage. Tell her to take good care of her body first. Madame of Duke Xing ordered. This kind of thing was not difficult. As long as the doctor who treated Wang Yishu gave her some medicine, she would be able to wake up. It was not that Wang Yishu couldn't wake up, but Madame of Duke Xing sent someone into the imperial palace and secretly told her not to wake up. Otherwise, she would face something more terrible than fainting. In fact, when Wang Yishu was in the imperial palace, she had already woken up. She just listened to Madame of Duke Xing's words and pretended to be unconscious until now. Now that she was out of the imperial palace, it was inappropriate to pretend to be unconscious, so she simply let her be really ill. What else could she ask a bedridden person? Moreover, Wang Yishu's illness could reduce some rumors and even make people think that she might have been killed, which was good for Duke Xing's mansion. Nanny Sheng, who tried to reduce her presence, hurriedly stood up and agreed, but then hesitated. Madam, what about Qin's mansion? Prepare a generous gift. I will officially recognize Qi Rongji as my family. Madame of Duke Xing took a deep breath and said. Even if she was unwilling to do this, she had to show her willingness at this time. She had to let people see that she not only had no grudge against Qin's mansion, but was also very friendly. As for why Wang Yishu wanted to deal with Qin Wanru, only God knew. Wang Yishu was so ill that she could not speak clearly, so no one could get the answer from her. Yes, madam, I will prepare it right away. Nanny Sheng nodded and left. In the yard, an old maid suddenly rushed over, walked to the curtain of the main room, and reported, Madam, Countess Yong asks to see you. No. Madame of Duke Xing refused coldly. Just tell her that Ishu is ill and can't wake up. I am treating her with many doctors and have no time to see her. She did not want to be involved in the thing that she had given Countess Yong advice before, because it had nothing to do with her. She could not be found to be responsible for it. Chapter 296. When the generous gifts from Duke Xing's mansion were sent to Ningyuan Army General's mansion, Qin Wanru was walking with Shui Rulan in the garden. Shui Rulan was in good spirits. Qin Wanru asked someone to help her adjust well. Madame D and her daughter were locked up, so it was much quieter in the mansion. Madam of Duke Xing sent generous gifts to First Miss Qi and asked you to send someone to count them. An old maid hurriedly ran over and reported. He presented the gift list in his hand. A generous gift? Shui Rulan raised her eyebrows but did not accept it. Yes, it's a generous gift. At this time, it has been sent here. There are several big boxes. It is said that Madame Shui is asked to choose a day. Madam of Duke Xing will take first Miss Qi to the mansion. The old maid reported. Mother, let Qi Rongji's people order by themselves. Qin Wanru suggested. Although Qi Rongji lived in the Qin mansion, she was not the official miss of the Qin mansion. It was not good for the Qin mansion to handle such a matter of property. If nothing went wrong, it would be fine. But if something went wrong, the matter would be complicated and people might even think that the Qin mansion was greedy for property. What she said was exactly what Shui Rulan wanted. She immediately nodded and ordered the old maid, send the generous gifts to Miss Qi's yard, including the list of gifts. Shui Rulan was also wary of Madam of Duke Xing. After coming back from the palace, Qin Wanru told her that Madam of Duke Xing asked her to take care of Wang Yishu that day. She said that Wang Yishu wanted to hurt her as soon as they met. Since then, both Madame Dowager and Shui Rulan no longer trusted Madam of Duke Xing. Shui Rulan didn't want to take over the generous gifts she sent in such a big way. It was originally a matter between Duke Xing's mansion and Qi's mansion. If Qi Rongji didn't live in Qin's mansion, it had nothing to do with Qin's mansion. When the old maid was about to leave, Qin Wanru suddenly stopped her, turned to Shui Rulan and said, Mother, send the gifts directly to Qi's mansion. Although Qi Rongji lives in our mansion, she does have a home. It is inappropriate to put those gifts in our mansion. Wanru, do you mean to let the people of Qi's mansion do the inventory? Shui Rulan said thoughtfully. This is the best way. We'll send all the gifts to the Qi mansion. Even if something happens afterwards, it has nothing to do with us. Our people didn't touch it at all. Qin Wanru suggested with a smile. It was not that she was too cautious, but she had to be cautious when dealing with Madam of Duke Xing. Madam of Duke Xing was like a poisonous snake hiding in the grass, and no one knew when she would jump out. It was not bad to be cautious. All right, that's settled then. Shui Rulan also understood Qin Wanru's meaning, so she nodded and ordered the old maid again. The old maid responded and left. Mother, how is the investigation of Madame D's dowry list going? Looking at the back of the old maid, Qin Wanru asked. I didn't find anything, but this loss is really suspicious. Shui Rulan shook her head in confusion. She was also married. At that time, old grandma treated her well and owned 2 shops. Shui Rulan was not ignorant about the business of the shop. How could it keep losing money? Moreover, it was the shop of a married sister. But the account was so well done that she couldn't find any flaw. Mother, you can't find anything? Qin Wanru asked softly. I can't find anything. Shui Rulan shook her head and said innocently. Even if she knew there was something wrong, she couldn't find anything after checking, which was very aggrieving. Mother, what do you mean? Qin Wanru asked calmly. She reached out to help Shui Rulan gently and asked her to be careful of a pebble under her feet. Shui Rulan stepped over the pebble and gently pressed her forehead with a handkerchief. There was a little sweat on her forehead. She was a little tired after walking. She looked up and around, reached out to point at an octagonal pavilion in front of them and said, Wanru, let's go to the front and sit for a while. Mother, let's not go to the pavilion. It's windy there. Let's go to the empty yard and sit for a while. Qin Wanru shook her head and looked at an empty yard on the left. There were few masters in the Qin's mansion, so there were many empty yards. The yard in front of them was not small, but no one lived in it. Only when some masters wandered here in their spare time would they take a rest. Recently, only Shui Rulan and Qin Wanru, who accompanied Shui Rulan, liked to wander around. Madame Dowager focused on recuperation, so she was not so willing to move. Shui Rulan nodded. They entered the yard with several servant girls and sat down in the main room in the middle. The servant girls were busy making a heater to warm the room. Another servant girl made a stove to boil water. Because Shui Rulan would come here to rest for a while in the past, all the appliances were prepared. There was no one living in this yard, and the layout inside was mainly for enjoying the scenery. The large window opposite the main room was open and somewhat transparent. You could see several blooming plum blossoms on the opposite side. The red plum blossoms on the strong branches were a very elegant place to rest. The servant girls served the tea and retreated to the door. Qin Wanru personally reached out to pour a cup of tea for Shui Rulan and then poured one for herself. The tea was fragrant. Wanru, how about we send the dowry list to your big sister? Shui Rulan said with a smile. Big sister's dowry list? Qin Wanru smiled with her eyes shining. Yes, it's your big sister's dowry list. The marriage between your big sister and the heir of Duke Yong has been settled, so it is impossible to change it. Her dowry naturally has to be prepared. Shui Rulan picked up the teacup, took a sip, and said meaningfully after putting it down. Qin Yuru's dowry was actually prepared early. When she was in Jiangzhou, Qin Yuru also got married once. The dowry was carried to the Qi's mansion first. Later, the marriage between the two mansions was not agreed. In order to compensate for the loss of the Qi's mansion, this part of the dowry was not carried back and naturally stayed in the Qi's mansion. The dowry of the legitimate daughter of a noble aristocratic family was usually prepared after she grew up. At that time, Qin Huaiyong was considered to have a great power in Jiangzhou. Qin Yuru's dowry was not small and there were many good things in it. But now, they were all left in the Qi's mansion in Jiangzhou. She had to prepare again when she got married. However, the dowry prepared again would not be better than the one in Jiangzhou, and it would even be much worse. There was no doubt about this. The Qin's mansion, which had just moved to the capital city, was no longer the Ningyuan army general in Jiangzhou with great power. In such a short time, many things could not be bought even if they had money. Shui Rulan understood the meaning of this, Qin Wanru understood it, and even Madame D understood it. But Qin Yuru, who wanted to be the wife of the noble heir of Duke Yong and become one of the few noble ladies in the capital city, might not understand it. Father, have you prepared the dowry? Qin Wanru asked with a gentle smile. Her watery eyes were like a little fox's. Your father has prepared it. He originally planned to show it to your big sister, but it is much less. Shui Rulan said bluntly. Even she knew that the dowry had shrunk a lot when she saw it. But there was no other way. All the expenses of the Qin's mansion were very tight now. Such a dowry was squeezed out by Qin Huaiyong himself, and Madame Dowager also added a lot of private money in it. But even so, it was still not comparable with the previous one. Compensate Madame D's shop to big sister. Qin Wanru had already understood Shui Rulan's meaning. The dowry is too little, so we naturally need to subsidize it. But there is not much in the mansion, and even Madame Dowager has taken out her private money. Yuru is the only daughter of big sister, so it is reasonable for her to take out the dowry. Even you don't care about it, do you think that big sister will care about it? Shui Rulan said calmly. It is the best that mother can think so. Qin Wanru said with a smile. This was originally her idea. She also wanted to secretly hint Shui Rulan, but now she didn't need to hint at it. There was something wrong with Madame D's shop. Duke Yong's mansion embezzled the money in her dowry shop. Now they sent the money to Duke Yong's mansion, which could be regarded as letting Duke Yong's mansion suffer a silent loss. Moreover, others knew clearly that Qin Yuru could suffer a silent loss, but Qin Yuru couldn't. She slightly raised the corner of her mouth, and there was more deepness in her watery eyes. She was very happy to see Shui Rulan come up with such a plan by herself. If Shui Rulan was still so weak, how could she protect her child? If she had no means, she would finally fall into the joint hands of Duke Yong's mansion and Madame D, just like in the last life. What about the silver that needs to be paid first? After thinking for a while, Qin Wanru reminded Shui Rulan. Duke Yong's mansion used this reason. From this point of view, Ningyuan Army General's mansion owed Duke Yong's mansion a lot of money. Just owe it first. After all, we are a family, and we can discuss it. Shui Rulan said. Since she saw her ex-husband's family, she became more and more clear that she and Madame D could not coexist. In this case, she couldn't just take the blow without fighting back. That's true. Madame D married my father, and now big sister is going to marry child D. The two families are on good terms, and they are such close relatives. They won't be so shameless as to ask us to pay back the money. Qin Wanru smiled more happily. She and Shui Rulan looked at each other and saw the meaning in each other's eyes. They could owe money, but they couldn't pay back the money. Moreover, this kind of thing would be Qin Yuru's dowry in the future, and it would be sent to Duke Yong's mansion with Qin Yuru, no matter how much the previous shop had been ruined by Duke Yong's mansion. In the future, it would be under Duke Yong's mansion's management. Even if there was something fishy in it, it was Qin Yuru's business. It had nothing to do with Qin's mansion. Since this matter had been discussed, Shui Rulan and Qin Wanru talked about Qin Yuru's dowry in detail. This kind of thing was usually discussed by Madame Dowager and Shui Rulan, but this time Shui Rulan didn't hide it from Qin Wanru. She told Qin Wanru in detail bit by bit. Imperceptibly, Shui Rulan had already regarded Qin Wanru as the backbone, and felt that she couldn't rest assured if she didn't tell Qin Wanru about it. While listening, Qin Wanru added a few things that Shui Rulan didn't notice, and Shui Rulan nodded repeatedly. Chapter 297. Countess Yong wants to see me. Shui Rulan froze for a moment, put down the list in her hand, and asked in surprise. Every time Countess Yong came to see Madame D or Madame Dowager, and she never asked to see Shui Rulan alone. Yes, madam. The servant girl nodded repeatedly. Shui Rulan turned her eyes to Qin Wanru, frowned uneasily, and asked, "Why does she come to see me? Maybe she feels guilty." Qin Wanru smiled slightly and said meaningfully, "Guilty?" Shui Rulan didn't understand for a moment, and frowned even more. "Didn't that Miss Wang frame me in the palace? As long as Miss Wang is not crazy, she will not plot against a person she just met, unless there is a grudge between her and me." Qin Wanru calmly analyzed for Shui Rulan. She didn't mention what happened outside the palace gate, because it involved too many things. Since everyone thought it was a murder against Chu Luchen, then let everyone think so. Countess Yong knows Miss Wang. Shui Rulan looked a little annoyed. If anyone wanted to frame Qin Wanru or had a grudge against her, it would be Duke Yong's mansion except for Madame D. People from Duke Yong's mansion would definitely not see her and Wanru getting along well, so they would definitely frame her. She had asked Qin Wanru before why Wang Yishu framed Qin Wanru as soon as they met. Qin Wanru didn't want Shui Rulan to be involved in this kind of thing, so she just said vaguely that she didn't know. At this time, it corresponded with what she said before. She should know her. I heard that Countess Yong has a good relationship with Madame of Duke Xing, so she naturally knows Miss Wang, the niece of Duke Xing. Qin Wanru deliberately changed the topic. I see. No wonder Miss Wang framed you as soon as she met you. It turns out that it is because of Countess Yong. Shui Rulan was led astray as expected. After thinking for a while, she said angrily, "What should we do now?" "Mother, let's meet her first." Qin Wanru smiled, stood up, and said lightly, "If she has a gift, you might as well accept it. Ask Countess Yong to come and meet me." Shui Rulan thought it was reasonable, so she sat up slightly and said. The maid answered and left. Qin Wanru whispered a few words to Yujie, and Yujie nodded and left. After Qin Wanru told Shui Rulan a few things that she should pay attention to, she went behind the wide screen and hid. She also wanted to see what Countess Yong was going to say. Duke Yong's mansion had something to do with what happened at the gate of the palace. When Countess Yong came in, her attitude was very kind. Those who didn't know would think that Shui Rulan was the grandaunt of Duke Yong's mansion who married into Qin's mansion. After they sat down, Countess Yong pushed a gift list over with a smile on her face and said with a smile, "I heard that Madame of Duke Xing is going to officially recognize Miss Qi as her adopted daughter." I have nothing to send, so I sent a gift. Countess Yong's kind smile and polite tone seemed to be a totally different person from the previous Countess Yong, which was very surprising. How can I accept it? Besides, this is a happy event between Duke Xing's mansion and Qi's mansion, and it has nothing to do with our mansion. Shu Rulan didn't reach out to take the gift list, but just refused politely with a smile. How can it have nothing to do with your mansion? Everyone knows that Madam of Duke Xing fell in love with Miss Qi in your mansion. If Miss Qi is not in your mansion, how can there be such a fate? Countess Yong said with a smile. Although what she said was reasonable, it was still very far-fetched. But it was also right in this way. But this is... Shu Rulan smiled hesitantly, and it seemed that she didn't know what to say for a moment. Madam Shu, don't be so polite. What is the relationship between our mansions? We are originally two families who are going to get married, so we should celebrate a happy event. After all, it is a good thing between our two mansions. Miss Qi can recognize Madam of Duke Xing as her adopted daughter, which is also a blessing for her to meet in your mansion. Such a good blessing, I will share the joy today. Countess Yong said more and more affectionately, and her reason was more and more reasonable. At this time, she couldn't refuse anymore. Since Madam said so, I won't be so polite to you. Thank you, Madam. Shu Rulan said with a smile, reached out to take out the list, and only glanced at it slightly, and the joy on her face became more obvious. A trace of contempt flashed in Countess Yong's eyes involuntarily. As expected, Shu Rulan came from a small family, and when she saw a benefit, she looked like a blooming flower. But this was better, and it was easier for her to inquire about the news. These days, Countess Yong was frightened. It happened suddenly, and the whole body was affected. Things developed so fast that Countess Yong was still afraid. It was originally just a matter of scheming against Qin Wanru, but it actually led to a major event of assassinating Prince Chen. After Countess Yong knew this, she was so scared that she almost fainted. At that time, she went to Madam of Duke Xing to make a decision, but when she arrived at Duke Xing's mansion, she didn't see Madam of Duke Xing, and said that Madam of Duke Xing was sick. Countess Yong felt that she was also going to get sick because of fear. After returning to the mansion, the more she thought about it, the more frightened she became. Then the development of things became more and more shocking. These days, she was on tenterhooks every day, for fear that someone would come to check her accidentally. In just a few days, Countess Yong had white hair on her head, and she panicked at the slightest sign of trouble. After that, she went to find Madam of Duke Xing, but was told that Madam of Duke Xing was very busy. Duke Xing's niece framed Qin Wanru in the palace, and she accidentally fell and fainted. After being treated by the imperial physician in the palace, she was left at the gate of the palace, and Madam of Duke Xing went to pick her up. Countess Yong didn't give up, and went again, but was told that Madam of Duke Xing was busy asking someone to treat this niece, and had no time to see her. The more Madam of Duke Xing refused to see her, the more panicked Countess Yong became. At this time, hearing that Madam of Duke Xing wanted to marry Qi Rongji, who lived in Yongqin's mansion, she couldn't help but come to have a look and inquire about the news. Seeing that Shu Rulan accepted the gift and smiled so happily, Countess Yong also became relaxed. It seemed that no one connected Qin Wanru's matter to her, and she would be fine. Second miss, what happened in the palace that day? What happened to the niece of Duke Xing's mansion? Countess Yong restrained the contempt in her eyes, and asked with concern with a smile on her face. She didn't dare to ask what had happened at the gate of the palace directly, so she planned to take a roundabout way and talk about what had happened in the palace first. In fact, she was also curious about what had happened to Wang Yishu. She had seen the niece of Duke Xing several times, but she didn't seem to be the kind of person who had lost her mind. Didn't it be said that she had a good reputation before? I don't know what happened. Wanru was frightened after coming back, and now she is also sick. Now she is still recovering in the yard. Shu Rulan sighed and lied through her teeth. I don't know why Miss Wang is so hostile to Wanru. They just met for the first time, but she did such a cruel thing. Miss Wang used to have a good reputation. Although her family is not prominent, she is famous for her talent. It is so strange that she directly hurt second Miss this time. She is really vicious. Fortunately, evil people will be punished by God. It is said that she didn't wake up when she was in the palace. Even if she woke up at this time, she couldn't get up and was kept in bed with medicine every day. Countess Yong seemed to share the same hatred for the enemy and showed a little anger on her face. Yes, Wanru was also frightened. She entered the palace safely, but Shui Rulan didn't dare to go on. Obviously, what she said next was a little forbidden. Second Miss was really unlucky that day. It is said that when she was at the gate of the palace, she had an accident and almost lost her life. Countess Yong calmly changed the topic to the gate of the palace and sighed with emotion. Behind the screen, Qin Wanru smiled slightly and her eyes were cold. As expected, Countess Yong's purpose today was to inquire about this matter. This matter must have something to do with Countess Yong. But Countess Yong's means were so superb that this matter had not been found to be related to her until now. It seemed that Duke Yong's mansion was not completely decadent as people thought. Wanru really almost had a big accident that day. She encountered that kind of thing in almost. Our Madam Dowager wants to take Wanru to worship Bodhisattva. When Wanru gets better, we will go. Shui Rulan sighed and said. The panic in her eyes was very real. Shui Rulan and Madam Dowager didn't know what happened that day. After knowing it, Madam Dowager and Shui Rulan almost fainted. If Prince Chen didn't save her, Qin Wanru would have lost her life at the gate of the palace. Thinking of this matter, Madam Dowager and Shui Rulan had a lingering fear. The news later said that this was a plot against Prince Chen, and the target was Prince Chen. Qin Wanru was involved in it. But no matter what the reason was, it was a fact that Qin Wanru almost lost her life. In the end, Madam Dowager kept Qin Wanru in the inner court and never allowed her to go out. Even if she wanted to go to her own shop, Madam Dowager didn't allow it. What on earth is going on? Why did second Miss get involved in it? Countess Yong asked cautiously, and her face also changed. In fact, she was really very strange, but she had no place to ask about it. If Prince Chen was involved in dealing with Qin Wanru, it would be a crime of confiscating the whole family and exterminating the whole family. Fortunately, Madam of Duke Xing asked her to be wise to protect herself and handle things cautiously. She must not get herself involved in it, so she found out a spy that had been buried for many years. Originally, she thought it was not a big deal, and she just borrowed it. Even if something happened to Qin Wanru, so what? She was not a famous noble lady in the capital city. She only reported that the horse of Prince Zhou's mansion was frightened and accidentally bumped into Prince Chen. Could it be that someone would fight against Prince Zhou for Qin Wanru? But in the end, this matter became like this. No one expected that Qin Wanru was actually a hypothetical target, and Prince Chen was the real target. This made Countess Yong, the initiator, confused. Why didn't she know about the plot against Prince Chen? Could it be that the coachman had already turned to another master and made a series of schemes against her? Because of this matter, Countess Yong now had a hard time in the mansion. Not only was she reprimanded by Duke Yong, but even Duke Yong's old madam also found an excuse to slap her in the face in front of everyone. Thinking of this, her face seemed to hurt faintly, and she couldn't help but secretly clench her teeth. This old beggar only knew how to favor her daughter. She didn't know what kind of person her daughter was. Madam, this is a trap. Shui Rulan looked around, turned her head, and said in a low voice. Countess Yong was shocked and asked anxiously, "What do you mean?" Chapter 298. They are still investigating this matter. It is said that this matter is related to the previous rebellion, and if it is found out, the whole family will be executed. Shui Rulan said nervously according to Qin Wanru's order. This matter is related to the previous rebellion? Countess Yong suppressed her trembling lips and felt as if she had fallen into ice. The rebellion happened a few years ago. At that time, the world was almost in chaos. Many aristocratic families were involved in it, and finally the whole family was uprooted. Among them, there were several aristocratic families that were more prominent than Duke Yong's mansion. Thinking of this matter, Countess Yong not only had a lingering fear, but also trembled all over. At this time, it was not easy for her to grit her teeth and bear it. Exactly. You see, even people in the capital city dare not talk about this matter. Shui Rulan said. Madam Shui, you are right. I suddenly remembered that I have something to do in the mansion, so I won't bother you. I will come next time when I have time. Countess Yong couldn't sit anymore, suddenly stood up, and said with a forced smile. Madam, you seldom come here. Don't you want to stay for a while? Shui Rulan stood up and politely urged her to stay. No, we will talk next time when we have time. Countess Yong said. At this time, she didn't have the mood to sit here and chat. She had to go to see if there were any clues. Although she had thought about it before, the more she thought about it, the more worried she was. If this matter was found out, it would be a disaster. Madam, please go ahead. Shui Rulan smiled and looked at Countess Yong, who was uncomfortable all over. Countess Yong said a few more polite words and left in a hurry. Hearing her footsteps leaving, Qin Wanru slowly walked out from behind the screen. Shui Rulan waved her hand, and all the servants around her left. Qianghua walked at the end and closed the door for them very considerately. From the question and answer between Countess Yong and her madam, Qianghua also sensed some meaning. After leaving the door, she carefully guarded the door, not daring to slack off. Wanru, this matter is related to you? Inside the room, Shui Rulan asked with a pale face. Although she was not very smart, she could see that it was not a small matter. Even Countess Yong was scared and left in a hurry. If Qin Wanru, an unmarried girl, was involved, there would be a big problem. Don't worry, mother. This has nothing to do with me. I just got involved accidentally. It's not a big deal. Besides, I almost lost my life. No one will suspect me. Qin Wanru knew that Countess Yong's words reminded Shui Rulan of something and hurriedly comforted her with a smile. Seeing that Qin Wanru was smiling calmly without any panic, and her pink face was still faintly blushing, neither pale nor flustered, Shui Rulan's heart was finally relieved. From the looks of it, it shouldn't be a big problem. That's great. After sitting down, he picked up the teacup beside him and took a deep gulp. Only then did he feel a little relieved. I thought you were involved. If they were to get involved in this, it would not be a one-man affair. Don't worry, mother. If it was really related to me, the Imperial Palace would come to ask me. Qin Wanru said with a slight smile. Her eyes were calm, and she suppressed this matter tightly in her heart. Since everyone thought so, and it was obvious that Chu Luchen also wanted everyone to think so, this matter should naturally be like this. It was not good for Shui Rulan to know too much. Although Shui Rulan was not the weak Shui Rulan in the previous life, it did not mean that she dared to accept such a thing. This kind of thing was almost like a rebellion. It's good that you are fine. Shui Rulan whispered with concern, and then changed the topic with a cold face. What does Countess Yong mean? Could it be that she was involved in this? What should we do? If it was something else, the crime committed by Duke Yong's mansion would naturally be borne by the people of Duke Yong's mansion. But if it was a crime of rebellion, the whole family would be involved. Now Qin's mansion and Duke Yong's mansion were not among the 9 families. How could Shui Rulan not be angry? Mother, she won't be involved in it. If she was involved, how could Countess Yong sit here and chat with you now? Qin Wanru comforted her softly. Yes, yes, yes. Shui Rulan was comforted very well. She nodded repeatedly, feeling that her heart was swaying up and down violently. She reached out and rubbed her forehead, feeling a dull pain. Mother, I deliberately asked you to say those words according to Countess Yong's words just to scare her. It seems that Countess Yong is very interested in what happened to me at the gate of the Heaven Palace. I want to scare her so that she won't ask about it everywhere, in case she causes trouble and gets our mansion involved. Seeing that Shui Rulan believed her, Qin Wanru explained with a smile. What Shui Rulan said was very reasonable. Countess Yong was asking about what happened at the gate of the Heaven Palace everywhere, which was causing trouble. Yesterday, when her cousin returned to the mansion, he repeatedly told her that no matter who talked about this matter, she should only say that she didn't know clearly and should not talk about it with others, let alone discuss it. If Countess Yong was inquiring about it everywhere, wasn't it the root of trouble? It was good to scare her away. Seeing that Shui Rulan was no longer flustered, Qin Wanru said a few more words and then left with Shui Rulan. It was late now, and Shui Rulan was going to rest. When walking to the yard, they met Yujie, who came back in a hurry, after a few steps. Seeing Qin Wanru, she hurriedly stepped forward and saluted. Did you see it? Qin Wanru smiled slightly and continued to walk back. Yes, not only Mei Shui, but also Mei Yan. Both of them saw it. Mei Shui first. When I accidentally passed by her, I mentioned something about Duke Xing's mansion. Mei Shui went to see it, and then hurried back. After a while, she took Mei Yan and Qin Wanru to see it. This generous gift was sent to Qin's mansion by Madame of Duke Xing. Although it was given to Qi Rongji now lived in Qin's mansion. But later, Shui Rulan asked someone to tell the supervisor of Duke Xing's mansion who sent the gift to send it directly to Qi's mansion. The gift had been sent to Qin's mansion, and it was necessary to sort it out and send it out. It would take a lot of time for Qin Yuru to know it and send someone to inquire about it. The gift sent by Duke Xing's mansion was particularly generous this time, and they also openly expressed that they would publicly take Qi Rongji into Duke Xing's mansion and raise her as a miss of Duke Xing's mansion in the future. With the status of Duke Xing's mansion, it would be a joke if Qi Rongji adopted a daughter too easily. Because Madame of Duke Xing didn't like Qi Rongji before, she just said it but didn't do it. This time, Madame of Duke Xing made great efforts to publicize this matter. There was such a big difference before and after, and she was also guilty. But different from Countess Yong, she did it for Wang Yishu. Qin Wanru was very clear that even if Madame of Duke Xing pushed the matter at the gate of the palace behind the scenes, she would not reveal any trace. Moreover, even if Countess Yong was found out, Madame of Duke Xing would not be found out. This woman hid very deeply. If it weren't for the bits and pieces of the last life and the gossip of Qin Yuru and her daughter from time to time, even if Qin Wanru was reborn, she wouldn't think that everything was related to her. She was the driving force behind her tragedy. Even if Qin Wanru was reborn, she didn't dare to relax her vigilance in front of such a woman. Miss, will first Miss make trouble? Yujie looked at Qin Wanru who was silent and said. She deliberately sent such a message to Qin Yuru who was in confinement. She guessed that this matter had something to do with First Mississippi, yes. Qin Wanru said with certainty. On the one hand, she deliberately sent this news to Qin Yuru to bury a future trouble. Compared with Qin Rongji's generous gift, Qin Yuru would feel that her dowry was more shabby. With this comparison, how could Qin Yuru bear it? But now this was not the most important thing. A trace of coldness flashed across her watery eyes. In the last life, although Qin Yuru was not the nominal adopted daughter of Madame of Duke Xing, she was almost like an adopted daughter. She not only got the appreciation of Madame of Duke Xing, but also got the favor of old Madame of Duke Xing. They deliberately brought her to Duke Xing's mansion to raise her. Of course, it did not mean that they really liked her at first sight. Qin Yuru was not so charming, and Duke Xing's mansion would not casually recognize a miss from another mansion. The secret that dragged her into the boundless sea of blood in the last life would gradually surface. She waited patiently, Today, seeing so many gifts from Duke Xing's mansion, Qin Yuru would envy them and have some uncontrollable thoughts. Madame D had an idea early, otherwise she would not be so interested in the glass cup in her grandma's hand and even viciously wanted to destroy Jingxin Monastery. Qin Yuru wore the pattern of the bluegrass seal, which attracted the attention of Duke Xing's mansion. It was time to draw the net. Now the generous gift from Madame of Duke Xing to Qi Rongji gave her a great opportunity. After the thing about Wang Yishu, did Madame of Duke Xing want to take this opportunity to get close to Qin's mansion? This was a good opportunity. She believed that Madame D also thought so. Mother, why does Qi Rongji get a good gift? She is just raised in our family. I don't believe that Madame of Duke Xing will really like her. Under the light, Qin Yuru gnashed her teeth and said. Thinking of what the two servant girls had described to her before, she was jealous. Why did Qi Rongji have such great luck? Moreover, this luck came from her own family. She was not willing to accept it. This should be her fated chance. She was the most honorable lady in the Qin's mansion, and she should be more honorable. Sneaking into Madame D's yard, Qin Yuru lifted the cloth covering her head and said angrily after telling her what had happened. Don't worry. The thin Madame D comforted her. Under the light, her beautiful face almost looked like a ghost, showing her high cheekbones. Mother, how can I not worry? You used to say that I have a great chance. But now, I am not only locked up by my father, but also this great chance has been taken away by Qi Rongji. Qin Yuru still said angrily, as if she did not see Madame D's pale and thin face. She can't take it away. She just wants to shut people up. Madame D said gloomily and gave a hint to Nanny Zhou. Nanny Zhou went into the inner room and soon came out with a seal and put it in front of Qin Yuru. The bluegrass seal looked a little familiar to Qin Yuru. Chapter 299. I took it from that bitch. That old beggar didn't notice it, so I took it from her. Fenghua glazed cup might not be as important as this. Madame D's bony face was full of pride, and her eyes looked bigger and gloomier. Fenghua glazed cup. What is this? Qin Yuru asked blankly. When that girl was sent to me, she was wearing this seal, and there was a precious Fenghua glazed cup in her bag. But when the old beggar came back, she took the Fenghua glazed cup back. She didn't know that this seal was worn by the bitch, Madame D sneered. If she hadn't been clever at that time, she wouldn't have gotten this bluegrass seal. But now she had lost it, so she had to make another one based on her memory. Mother, does this seal have anything to do with the bitch's background? What can it do to me? Qin Yuru looked at the seal in her hand and threw it on the table. She was not interested. Nanny Zhou was shocked when she saw it. She rushed to hold the seal that was thrown over and shouted, "First miss, my little aunt, you can't throw it away. It's a great blessing." Madame D was also shocked by Qin Yuru's action. She said angrily, "You can't throw this away. It has something to do with the current situation. If I'm right, this should be the only chance to solve your current predicament. Is the bitch's thing that good?" Qin Yuru frowned and said disapprovingly. For many years, she had been raised by Madame D to be the most honorable young lady. Qin Wanru was just an illegitimate child picked up and raised. She was just one more person in the mansion, and there was no difference between her and a servant girl. It was only because she was fated with the old madam that she treated her like a young miss. That was what Madame D told Qin Yuru, and Qin Yuru thought so too. Qin Wanru was just a servant girl, and she had to be the scapegoat. It was not a big deal if Qin Wanru was bullied by Qi Rongji. She was just a bitch who lived in Qin Yuru's mansion. But Madame D's words didn't mean this today. If mother is right, this girl should be the biological daughter of heir of Duke Xing. I have seen heir of Duke Xing when I was in the capital city. Unfortunately, when this girl was sent to me, I heard that her father had died. If I had seen her, I would definitely be able to recognize whether she is heir of Duke Xing or not. Madame D stuck out her tongue and licked her dry and cracked lips. There was a flash of excitement in her eyes. Before she got married, she was the daughter of lineal descent of Duke Yong's mansion. At that time, Duke Yong's mansion was more prosperous than it was now. She was indeed one of the few noble ladies in the capital city, but her status was still inferior to that of the heir of Duke Xing. The handsome young general was actually a dream of Countess Yong before she got married, but in the end, it was just a dream. The heir of Duke Xing fell in love with Infanta Qinghua, the daughter of Rui, and great elder princess. Later, the emperor issued a decree to appoint them to marry each other. At that time, there were a lot of daughters of aristocratic families who were sad. Although they all had extraordinary identities, they were still lower than the only daughter of Rui, and great elder princess. The biological daughter of the heir of Duke Xing. Is this true? Knowing such a secret, Qin Yuru's breathing quickened involuntarily. Di Fenglan had been in the capital city for a period of time, so she had heard about Duke Xing's mansion. Di Fenglan had long been in love with the current lineal eldest son of Duke Xing in private. When they were together in the past, they talked about Duke Xing's mansion the most. She also knew something about the past of Duke Xing's mansion. She knew that the current Duke Xing was not designated as the heir of Duke Xing in the past, but the former heir of Duke Xing died, so he had the current title. I wasn't sure at first, but last time you wore that set of clothes printed with orchids and went to Duke Xing's mansion. After that, Madame of Duke Xing gradually got along with me, and then she secretly inquired about the seal on your clothes. At that time, I felt that it was almost true. Madame D became more and more complacent. Originally, it was just a guess, and an uncertain guess. The cause was, of course, the Fenghua glazed cup. She had heard that there was a Fenghua glazed cup in the dowry of Infanta Qinghua to heir of Duke Xing. It was said that it was very valuable, but she had never seen it. Glazed cups were basically obtained from overseas. It could be said that the families who owned glazed cups were not ordinary families. It was said that the Fenghua glazed cup was even more extraordinary. But no matter how extraordinary it was, Madame D had never seen it. But she saw the glazed cup in Qin Wanru's bag. She was not sure whether it was this one, but she immediately thought of the one in the hands of heir of Duke Xing. But at that time, this thought only passed through her mind for a while. How could Qin Wanru be the daughter of heir of Duke Xing? How could the daughter of heir of Duke Xing become an orphan and be taken in by Qin Huayong and Madame Dowager? That was what Madame D thought at that time. But she was still careful. She secretly took off the orchid seal hanging on Qin Wanru's neck and kept it. Later, she also asked someone to inquire about heir of Duke Xing. But what she heard was that heir of Duke Xing died in the rebellion. Infanta Qinghua was found and finally gave birth to a son, but he also died. After that, she never heard that heir of Duke Xing and Infanta Qinghua had a daughter. This thought was deeply buried in Madame D's heart. After that, she also asked old Madame of Duke Yong about the former heir of Duke Xing and Infanta Qinghua. She only said that no one knew where they went in those years. At that time, because Infanta Qinghua and old Madame of Duke Xing didn't get along well, the former heir of Duke Xing took Infanta Qinghua and left the capital city after the old Duke Xing was furious. Later, they encountered troubled times. No one knew how they had been in those years or whether they had a child. But in the end, only Infanta Qinghua, who was pregnant, was found. But it was said that Infanta Qinghua was not in a clear state of mind and could not tell what had happened in the past few years. Madame D felt that this unclear state of mind was a good opportunity. Now it was even better that Infanta Qinghua was dead. She had never seen the bluegrass seal, but she had heard that Infanta Qinghua had a private seal in the style of bluegrass. It was embroidered with a slightly different embroidery pattern on Qin Yuru's clothes. As expected, it attracted Madame of Duke Xing's attention. Even though Madame of Duke Xing didn't say anything directly, Madame D felt that this was basically true. But she didn't have time to plot later. She had been looking for the lost seal but couldn't find it. In the end, she could only ask Nanny Zhou to make one, and this seal just fell into her hands not long ago. Yuru, as long as you can become the daughter of Duke Xing's mansion, no one dares to look down on you. Even if you have entangled with Qi Tianyu in the past, so what? How can Qi Tianyu dream of a noble lady like you? Even if you marry into Duke Yang's mansion in the future, no one dares to surpass you. Madame D laughed hysterically. She clenched her fists tightly and looked ferocious. Qin Yuru glanced at Madame D with some disgust. She quietly stepped back and pretended to press her face with a handkerchief. Mother, will Duke Xing's mansion accept me with just this seal? She may not recognize you openly, but she can definitely bring you to Duke Xing's mansion and let you be educated by the miss of Duke Xing's mansion. At least you will not be worse than Qi Rongji, the adopted daughter who was adopted halfway. No matter what, you will surpass her. Madame D said coldly. Will Duke Xing's mansion also send generous gifts? Thinking of the gifts of Duke Xing's mansion discussed by the servant girls in the mansion today, Qin Yuru's eyes lit up. Not only generous gifts, but also other things. You are taking the identity of the daughter of the former heir of Duke Xing. Such an identity is even higher than the current first miss of Duke Xing. How dare Duke Xing's mansion treat you indifferently? Moreover, you are the lineal granddaughter of Rui, and great elder princess. Qin Wanru was envied by Rui, and great elder princess before. If you are her lineal granddaughter, who dares to look down on you? Madame D's eyes became cold. She was not willing to let Qin Yuru know some other deals. She only needed to be the lineal daughter of Duke Xing's mansion. I understand. Qin Yuru said and nodded vigorously. She was cheered up. As long as she thought that she would become the real lineal daughter of Duke Xing's mansion, she felt more and more noble for a moment. She did not think that she was obviously a fake, nor did she think about how serious the consequences would be if she failed to do this. Yuru, your age needs to be changed. It happens that your maternal grandmother sent someone to talk about your marriage with Di Yan. I asked someone to postpone it. I only said that you are 13 years old, which is a little young. But after this, I am afraid that mother cannot be so close to you. Di Yan's eyes flickered with a strange light. His smile was a bit deep under the light, as if he was a starving wolf that had seen a delicious meal. Say I am 13 years old? Qin Yuru asked in confusion. Why do you say I am 13 years old? If you say you are 15 years old, at that time, everyone knows that the former heir of Duke Xing and Infanta Qinghua are still in the capital city. No one will think that you are their daughter. Only during the period when they leave the capital city, it is possible that they have a daughter who has been separated from them. The father of Chu Lu, the servant girl, was the servant of the former heir of Duke Xing. Unfortunately, he disappeared later. This was also a pity for Madame D. It would be better if there was a servant to prove this. It was not easy to find this servant who was looking for Qin Wanru in Jiangzhou, but he disappeared inexplicably because of Qin Wanru. Thinking of this, Madame D felt so angry that she banged on the table hard. The glazed cup, the seal of the orchid, and the servant of the former heir of Duke Xing who was still looking for his master. With these, everything could be made out of nothing. Even if there was no such a daughter, she could imitate one. Although Madame D had been doing this secretly, she did not have the courage to do it. But now there was a promoter behind, and she and Qin Yuru were in such a predicament. It seemed that only by becoming the daughter of the former heir of Duke Xing could she and her daughter have a chance to succeed. How could Madame D let go of such an opportunity? Her daughter was supposed to be born extraordinary. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.